I am Clara, 32 years old, and my family just attempted a hostile takeover of my life. I had bought an isolated beach house in Maine to recover from severe corporate burnout, seeking nothing but silence. Last night, my mother called to casually announce they were moving in for a family vacation, adding that if I did not like it, I could find somewhere else to stay. I simply hung up the phone and locked the doors. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to build a fortress to keep toxic family members out. I gripped the steering wheel of my rented sedan until my knuckles turned white. My mother's voice, distorted by the Bluetooth speaker, echoed through the quiet interior of the car. "We are moving in tomorrow, Clara. Your dad said it is fine. If you do not like it, you can find somewhere else to stay." I did not respond immediately. I stared out the windshield at the ocean view I had just purchased, the view I had sacrificed my health and my career to secure. "You cannot move into my house, Mom," I said, keeping my voice dangerously low. "I bought this place to recover after the breakdown. My doctor explicitly recommended isolation." "Oh, stop being so dramatic," she scoffed. "You quit your job because you could not handle a little corporate pressure, and now you expect us to pay for a hotel when you have a perfectly good beach house sitting empty. We have already packed the car. Your sister and her husband are coming too. We will see you at noon." She disconnected the call before I could object. I dropped my phone onto the passenger seat, my hands shaking. This was not a request. It was an invasion. For the past 5 years, I had worked as a lead financial analyst for a top-tier firm in Chicago. I practically lived in the office, subsisting on cold coffee and 4 hours of sleep a night. I had built a substantial nest egg, but it cost me everything else. 3 months ago, I collapsed during a board meeting. The doctors called it severe burnout, but it felt more like my body was shutting down. I resigned. The next day, took a large portion of my savings and bought this isolated beach house in coastal Maine. I needed silence. I needed time to heal. But my family had never understood boundaries. My sister Vanessa was the golden child. She was an event planner who married Marcus, a wealthy marketing executive, in a lavish ceremony our parents insisted on funding, draining their own savings in the process. Ever since the wedding, my parents had relied on me to cover their unexpected expenses. The broken boiler, the property taxes, the new car they just had to lease. I was the reliable bank account, the dutiful daughter who always paid the bills and never asked for anything in return. And now they were coming to commandeer my sanctuary. I stepped out of the car, the salty breeze whipping my hair across my face. I looked up at the 3-story modern house, its large glass windows reflecting the stormy gray sky. If they thought they could simply walk in and take over, they were sorely mistaken. I was done being the accommodating doormat. If they wanted a family vacation at my expense, I would give them an experience they would never forget. I unlocked the front door, my mind already racing with a plan. The house was sparsely furnished, primarily featuring a large dining table and a few comfortable sofas. It was a blank canvas, perfect for the welcome I intended to prepare. I pulled out my phone and dialed the local contractor who had recently inspected the property's foundation. "Mr. Henderson, this is Clara Jenkins. I need a favor. I need you to install a series of smart locks on every interior door of my house by tomorrow morning. I am willing to pay triple your emergency rate." He agreed immediately. Next, I contacted the security firm that monitored the property. I authorized a complete lockdown protocol that I could control entirely from an app on my phone. By the time the sun set over the ocean, the house was wired like a fortress. I spent the evening moving my essential belongings into the master suite on the top floor, ensuring it was fully stocked with food and water. I locked the door and activated the security panel. The rest of the house was theirs to explore, but under my strict conditions. At exactly 11:45 the next morning, a sleek black SUV pulled into the driveway. My mother emerged first, wearing a wide-brimmed sun hat and an oversized pair of sunglasses. My father followed, struggling to pull 2 massive suitcases from the trunk. Vanessa and Marcus stepped out next, looking like they were ready for a photo shoot rather than a family visit. I watched them from the 3rd-floor balcony, my phone gripped tightly in my hand. I opened the smart home app and tapped the icon to unlock the front door. I heard the heavy wood swing open, followed by my mother's booming voice echoing through the entryway. "Clara, where are you? We are parched. Be a dear and fetch the luggage. I did not move. I waited as their footsteps echoed through the lower level. They moved from the living room to the kitchen, their voices carrying up the stairs. The place is practically empty, Vanessa complained, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor. And she didn't even bother to stock the refrigerator. There is nothing in here but bottled water. I told you she was being dramatic, my mother replied, her tone dripping with annoyance. She probably locked herself in her room to make a point. Marcus, go see if you can find the master bedroom. We will take that one. I smiled grimly. The master bedroom was the only room in the house that had a working air conditioning unit and an attached balcony. I tapped the screen on my phone, engaging the smart lock on the master suite door. I heard Marcus ascending the stairs. He rattled the doorknob, then knocked loudly. Clara, open up. Your mother wants this room. I remained silent, watching the security feed from the camera positioned in the hallway. Marcus huffed in frustration and returned downstairs. It is locked, he announced, and she is not answering. Typical, my father grumbled. Fine. We will take the guest rooms on the second floor. Vanessa, you and Marcus take the room facing the ocean. I waited until they had dragged their heavy suitcases up to the second floor. The moment they stepped into the hallway, I tapped the screen again. The loud click of the smart locks engaging echoed through the house. The 3 guest bedroom doors were now sealed shut. My mother grabbed the nearest doorknob and rattled it violently. Clara, what is the meaning of this? The doors are locked. I picked up the intercom microphone connected to the house's PA system. My voice echoed through the speakers, calm and steady. Welcome to my home. As I mentioned on the phone, I am currently recovering and require absolute isolation. Since you insisted on inviting yourselves, you will find that the house has been divided. Open these doors immediately, my father demanded, his face reddening as he glared at the ceiling speaker. This is no way to treat your family. You did not treat me like family when you demanded to move into my home without my consent, I replied. The lower level is open for your use. The kitchen is functional, though empty. The bathrooms are operational. However, the bedrooms and the upper levels are restricted. Restricted. Vanessa screeched, her perfectly manicured hands flying to her face in shock. Where are we supposed to sleep? You cannot expect us to sleep on those uncomfortable sofas. You can sleep wherever you choose, I said, my voice unwavering. But if you want access to the bedrooms, you will have to pay the daily rental fee. The rate is $500 per room, payable in advance. Marcus slammed his fist against the heavy wooden door, the sound echoing through the empty hallway. He turned toward the nearest decorative table, his eyes locking onto a heavy brass statue shaped like a seagull. He picked it up, his knuckles turning white as he gripped the base. I am not paying to sleep in a house my wife's sister owns. I am going to break this door down right now. Marcus pulled his arm back, his face twisted in a mask of arrogant rage. The heavy brass seagull caught the sunlight streaming through the hallway window. He aimed directly for the electronic keypad mounted above the handle of the guest suite. I did not blink. My finger hovered over the security application on my tablet. Just as he launched the statue forward, I tapped the red emergency icon. A localized high-decibel siren erupted from the concealed speakers lining the second-floor ceiling. The sound was deafening, specifically engineered to disorient intruders. Marcus missed the keypad entirely. The brass bird slammed harmlessly against the solid oak frame and clattered onto the hardwood floor. He immediately dropped to his knees, clapping both hands tightly over his ears. His face contorted in sheer agony as the piercing shriek filled the narrow corridor. Downstairs, I could hear my mother and sister screaming, their voices completely drowned out by the mechanical wail of the security system. My father stumbled up the stairs, his hands also clamped tightly over his head. He glared furiously up at the nearest security camera. Clara, turn this off right now, Richard bellowed, his face turning a deep shade of crimson. You are going to deafen us. I pressed the intercom button, ensuring my voice cut cleanly through the blaring alarm. Tell Marcus to step away from the door and leave the statue on the ground, I commanded. My father kicked the brass bird away from Marcus and dragged his son-in-law backward by the collar of his designer shirt. He is away from the door. Turn the alarm off now. I tapped the screen. The siren cut off instantly, leaving a heavy ringing silence in its wake. Marcus remained on the floor, breathing heavily and glaring up at the camera lens. "If you attempt to damage my property again, I will not just trigger the alarm," I announced smoothly. "I will notify the local authorities and press charges for vandalism. The nearest police station is exactly 5 miles away. Do we understand each other?" Marcus scrambled to his feet, his chest heaving with indignation. "You are absolutely insane," he spat, pointing a shaking finger at the ceiling. "This is a family vacation. You do not treat your own family like common criminals. You surrendered the privilege of being treated like family when you decided my personal boundaries did not apply to you," I replied evenly. "The living room sofas are quite comfortable. I suggest you get some rest and think about your choices." I terminated the intercom connection and sat back in my plush leather chair. On the security feed, I watched the four of them stand in defeated silence for a long moment. Richard rubbed his temples in frustration, while Evelyn shot one last venomous look at the camera before turning around. "Come on," she muttered bitterly. "We are not paying her a single dime. We will sleep downstairs." They dragged their heavy luxury luggage back down the grand staircase, the wheels thumping rhythmically against the polished wood. I switched the camera view to the main living area. The space was expansive, featuring two large linen sectionals facing the oceanfront windows. It was a beautiful room, but certainly not the luxury resort suite experience they had arrogantly anticipated. Vanessa dramatically threw herself onto the nearest sofa, letting out a loud, exaggerated groan. "My back is going to be completely ruined by tomorrow morning," she whined, massaging her lower spine. "This is entirely unacceptable. Marcus, you should have just broken the door down when you had the chance." He almost ruptured my eardrums. Marcus snapped back, massaging his jaw and pacing the room. "Your sister is a complete psychopath. We should not have come here." Evelyn began pulling blankets out of her massive suitcase, her face contorted with deep disgust. "She has always been exactly like this," Evelyn declared loudly, fully aware I could hear every single word through the surveillance system. "Selfish to the absolute core. It is the exact same terrible attitude she had when you graduated college, Vanessa. Do you remember that disaster?" Vanessa scoffed, crossing her arms over her chest and pouting. "How could I possibly forget I found that gorgeous luxury loft apartment downtown? It was absolutely perfect for hosting my high-end clients and building my event planning business. All she had to do was co-sign the lease. She was making 6 figures at her fancy finance job. She had the perfect credit score, but she flat out refused to help her own blood. I let you live in a tiny, cramped studio apartment while she hoarded her wealth," Evelyn added furiously, fluffing a decorative throw pillow. "She has never wanted to see you succeed, sweetie. She has always been deeply threatened by your natural charm and your beauty. It is pure jealousy." I listened to their ridiculous revisionist history with a cold, steady smile. They conveniently omitted the crucial fact that Vanessa had zero reliable income at the time. I would have been entirely responsible for a monthly rent that rivaled a commercial mortgage payment. They expected me to blindly fund her glamorous lifestyle while I worked myself into the ground, sacrificing my sleep and my health to build my savings. I closed the laptop screen, feeling a profound sense of validation. Securing the house with smart locks had been the absolute right decision. They were parasites draining my resources while actively resenting my success. I walked over to the plush king-size bed slipped between the crisp white cotton sheets and let the soothing rhythmic sound of the ocean waves pull me into a deep, uninterrupted sleep. The peace, however, was strictly temporary. The next morning, bright coastal sunlight streamed through the sheer curtains of the master suite. I stretched my arms, finally feeling genuinely rested and relaxed. Then a sharp, violent sound shattered the total tranquility of the house. Crash! Someone had just bypassed the heavy patio door. I threw back the crisp white sheets and grabbed my tablet from the nightstand. My heart pounded as I pulled up the first-floor security feed. The camera angle showed the kitchen. Richard was standing there in his pajamas, holding a heavy flathead screwdriver. He was aggressively wedging the metal tool into the seam of my $6,000 smart refrigerator. Shards of safety glass littered the floor near the patio entrance. He had shattered the sliding door to access the exterior tool shed. I marched out of my suite and hurried down the glass staircase. My bare feet stepped carefully around the shattered glass as I entered the kitchen. Richard grunted, his face red with exertion, as he tried to pry the reinforced refrigerator doors apart. "What exactly do you think you are doing?" I asked, my voice slicing through the tense morning air. Richard jumped, dropping the screwdriver. It clattered loudly against the imported tile. He spun around, trying to catch his breath. "We are hungry, Clara. You locked us out of the bedrooms and refused to provide breakfast. A man has a right to eat. You do not have a right to vandalize my property," I replied smoothly. I looked at the deep gouges he had scraped into the stainless steel finish of the refrigerator doors. "You are acting like a common thief breaking into a vending machine." "Do not speak to your father that way," Evelyn snapped, stepping carefully over the broken patio glass. "He is simply trying to provide for his family since you decided to starve us. You are being completely unreasonable." I tapped the screen of my tablet. With a single swipe, I disabled the entire kitchen power grid. The soft hum of the refrigerator ceased immediately. The digital display on the appliance went entirely black. "You can try to pry it open all day," I stated calmly. "The power is severed. The internal temperature will hold for 48 hours, but the doors will not open unless I authorize it from my primary control panel." "You just destroyed my patio door and damaged a luxury appliance for absolutely nothing." "This is abuse," Vanessa shrieked, throwing her hands up in the air. "You cannot legally deny us food. I am not denying you anything," I countered. "There is a local grocery store exactly 2 miles down the coastal highway. You have a vehicle. You have money. You can purchase your own food like capable adults. I am not your personal chef, and I am certainly not your maid." Just then, a sharp knock echoed from the front door. I tapped my tablet to unlock the entryway. A delivery driver from the most exclusive local cafe stepped inside, carrying 2 large thermal bags. He smiled warmly as he handed them to me. "Good morning, Ms. Jenkins. I brought the gourmet lobster Benedict, the fresh pressed citrus juices, and the artisan pastries you ordered." "Thank you," I said, handing him a generous cash tip. "I appreciate the prompt service." The driver nodded and exited the smart lock, engaging firmly behind him. I carried the aromatic bags to the large dining table and began unpacking my feast. The rich scent of butter, toasted sourdough, and fresh lobster filled the room. My family stood frozen in the kitchen, their stomachs audibly rumbling as they stared at my luxurious breakfast. Marcus stepped forward, his face pale with suppressed rage. "You think you hold all the cards here, Clara, but you are making a massive legal mistake. We have rights." I raised an eyebrow, slowly picking up my fork. "Please, Marcus, enlighten me about your rights." "We are legally occupying this residence," Marcus declared, puffing out his chest and attempting to look intimidating. "You invited us here. We stayed the night. We now possess squatter rights. If you want us out, you have to undergo a formal eviction process. That takes months. You cannot just lock us out of rooms or deny us basic amenities. I am calling a lawyer today. We are going to take you to court." I took a slow bite of my food before I responded to his ridiculous threats. "You know absolutely nothing about Maine real estate law, Marcus. In this state, you must reside on a property for a minimum of 30 consecutive days to establish any form of tenant rights. You have been here for less than 24 hours. You are not tenants." Marcus opened his mouth to argue, but I held up a single finger to silence him. Furthermore, I added, pulling up the security footage on my tablet and turning the screen toward him. "I have high-definition video evidence of you attempting to smash my door keypad with a brass statue last night. I also have crystal-clear footage of Richard breaking a glass door and vandalizing my refrigerator with a tool he stole from my shed. That is documented destruction of private property. If you attempt to call a lawyer, I will immediately call the police, I promised them. I will hand over the video files. The local authorities will not see you as tenants facing an illegal eviction. They will see you as hostile intruders committing felony property damage." Suddenly, Evelyn let out a sharp, mocking laugh. She reached into the pocket of her silk robe and pulled out her smartphone. Her face twisted into a triumphant, arrogant smirk. "You think you are so incredibly clever," Clara, Evelyn sneered, her eyes flashing with malicious delight. "But you forgot who you are dealing with. I just sent a mass text message to the entire executive board of my Chicago Country Club. 4 of my wealthiest friends are currently vacationing in Kennebunkport, just 20 minutes away from here. I told them we just purchased this magnificent beach estate. I invited them all over for a lavish beachside luncheon this afternoon to celebrate our new property. Let us see exactly how you handle real public humiliation today. I sat on the edge of the plush, king-sized bed, watching the security feed on my tablet. Evelyn and Richard were standing on the crushed gravel of the driveway, completely unaware of the camera trained directly on them. 2 sleek black luxury sedans had just pulled up their engines, purring quietly. 4 women emerged dressed in flowing linen pants and expensive silk blouses. They were Evelyn's country club friends, the women she constantly tried to impress. The same women who had snubbed me for years because I preferred a quiet career over endless social climbing. Evelyn practically glided toward them, throwing her arms wide in an exaggerated gesture of welcome. "Oh, darling, I am so thrilled you could make it," she cooed, embracing a tall blonde woman dripping in diamonds. "Welcome to my new summer sanctuary. I just had to buy this place for my recovery. The sea air is simply medicinal." I smiled, a cold, sharp expression forming on my face. Her recovery. The absolute audacity was staggering. She was stealing my narrative, my trauma, and my financial achievement, packaging it all into a neat little story to elevate her own status. I grabbed a lightweight cardigan, draped it over my shoulders, and headed for the glass staircase. It was time to introduce myself. I walked down the stairs, timing my entrance perfectly. Evelyn was ushering her friends through the front door, gesturing expansively toward the high ceilings and the panoramic ocean view. I had the contractor completely gut the interior, Evelyn boasted loudly. I wanted a minimalist aesthetic, something clean and healing, you know. "Good afternoon, ladies," I said, stepping onto the landing. My voice was clear and projected easily across the cavernous room. Evelyn froze. The elegant sweep of her arm halted mid-air. The 4 women turned to look at me, their faces registering mild confusion. Clara, Evelyn stammered, her eyes darting nervously between me and her wealthy guests. "I thought you were resting upstairs. I did not want to disturb you." I walked down the remaining steps, maintaining direct eye contact with the tall blonde woman. "I am feeling much better today, Mom." I turned to the guests, extending my hand. "I am Clara Jenkins. I am the sole owner of this property. Welcome to my private medical recovery retreat. I hope you enjoy the view I selected." The blonde woman shook my hand, her perfectly arched eyebrows raising slightly. "Your property, Evelyn just told us she purchased this estate for her own health retreat." I let out a soft, practiced laugh. Did she really? How incredibly imaginative of her. "I purchased this house entirely with my own funds after resigning from my finance position in Chicago. My mother and sister invited themselves yesterday. They are currently occupying the downstairs sofas since they refused to pay the nightly room fee I established for the upper suites." The silence that followed was suffocating. The 4 women exchanged rapid, judgmental glances. In their world, nothing was more embarrassing than being caught in a blatant lie about wealth. Evelyn's face flushed a deep, humiliating crimson. "Clara is just joking," she forced out a tight, panicked laugh. "She has always had a very unique sense of humor. We are sharing the house. It is a family investment." "Actually, Mom, while we have your friends here, I wanted to discuss the catering," I interrupted smoothly, ignoring her desperate attempt to save face. "The local seafood delivery arrived an hour ago, but the restaurant called my cell phone. They said the credit card you provided over the phone was declined, twice. I assumed it was a bank error, but since I am the homeowner, they requested I cover the $600 bill." Evelyn looked like she might actually faint. Her jaw dropped and she quickly looked away from her friends. "It must be a fraud alert," she whispered frantically. "I have been traveling. The bank always freezes my accounts when I travel." "Of course," I replied, my voice laced with mock sympathy. "But until you sort that out with your bank, I will need you to reimburse me. Cash is perfectly acceptable. Unless, of course, Marcus wants to cover it. He is currently upstairs trying to figure out how to bypass my smart locks again." The tall blonde woman cleared her throat awkwardly. She adjusted the strap of her expensive handbag and took a distinct step backward toward the front door. You know, Evelyn, I completely forgot I have a hard stop at 2 o'clock for a spa appointment. We really should be heading back to Kennebunkport. It was lovely to see your daughter's new home. The other three women immediately chimed in with their own hasty excuses. Within 60 seconds, they were practically sprinting back to their luxury sedans. Evelyn stood in the foyer, her hands trembling as she watched their cars speed down the gravel driveway, kicking up dust in their wake. Her social standing within the country club had just evaporated. "You little witch!" Evelyn hissed, spinning around to face me. Her eyes were wide with pure, unadulterated fury. "You humiliated me in front of the board members. I will never be able to show my face at the club again." "You humiliated yourself when you decided to lie about my property," I countered calmly. "You wanted a lavish beachside luncheon, Evelyn. You just forgot that you cannot afford it, and I am no longer funding your delusions." Vanessa suddenly stormed out of the downstairs powder room, her face twisted in a vicious sneer. "You think you are so brilliant, Clara," she spat, her hands planted firmly on her hips. "You think locking us out and embarrassing Mom makes you the winner here. But you are not as untouchable as you think." I crossed my arms, unimpressed. "Is that right, Vanessa?" She smiled, a cruel, triumphant expression that reminded me of every time she had deliberately sabotaged me in the past. "You left your silver work laptop sitting right on the coffee table in the study," she announced, her voice dripping with venom. "The one you use for all those precious financial files. You did not even bother to put a password on the guest profile. I just spent the last 20 minutes wiping the entire hard drive. Every single file is gone. Try paying for this house when your career is completely erased." I stared blankly at my younger sister. She stood triumphantly in the narrow powder room doorway. The sleek silver laptop she proudly mentioned was resting quietly on the glass coffee table in the study. "You really think you destroyed my professional career?" I asked, stepping down off the stair and slowly walking toward the spacious living room. Vanessa followed behind me with a malicious grin spreading across her face. "I know I did, Clara. I dragged all your spreadsheets, client portfolios, and endless financial models straight into the trash and emptied it. I formatted the drive to be certain. You cannot recover a single byte of data." She crossed her arms, looking satisfied. It was the same look she wore on the day of my high school graduation. I was the class valedictorian, pacing the hallway while clutching my written speech. Vanessa bumped into me, her hands full of sticky iced coffee. She spilled the liquid directly onto my notes, rendering them completely unreadable right before I walked on stage. She offered a fake apology, her eyes holding cruel delight. She wanted me to humiliate myself because my academic success threatened her status as the popular golden child. I delivered that valedictorian speech entirely from memory. I received a standing ovation. Vanessa sulked in the bleachers the entire time. "You rely on sabotage when you feel inferior." "Vanessa," I said, stopping away from the laptop, "your lack of technical knowledge is astounding." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Call IT all you want, Clara. That data is gone forever. You are going to lose everything." I let out a sharp laugh that bounced off the high ceilings. I walked to the coffee table and picked up the device, opening the lid. The screen was completely black, displaying a single blinking green cursor. "This is not my computer, Vanessa," I explained. "My actual workstation is a heavily encrypted, biometric-secured machine locked safely inside the master suite upstairs. It requires two-factor authentication and a physical security key to even boot up." Vanessa frowned, her triumphant smile faltering slightly. "Then what is that?" "This is a decoy," I stated. "In cybersecurity, we call it a honeypot. It is an isolated device designed to look attractive to intruders. It contains absolutely zero personal or financial data." I set the laptop down on the glass table. "So what if it is a fake?" Vanessa scoffed, attempting to regain her footing. "I still wiped it clean. I still inconvenienced you." "You did more than inconvenience me, Vanessa," I replied. "The file you clicked on was an executable malware script. I designed it to test vulnerabilities. By attempting to delete that specific folder, you triggered an aggressive ransomware payload." Vanessa took a step back, her brow furrowing in confusion. What does that mean? I do not speak, nerd Clara. What did you do? I did not do anything, I corrected. You initiated a network-wide lockdown. That payload immediately scanned the active wireless network for connected devices. Since you and Marcus refused to pay the room fee, you are using the unsecured guest network I established for the lower floor. Suddenly, frantic footsteps pounded down the second-floor hallway. Marcus burst through the doorway to the stairs, his face drained of color. He was clutching his smartphone in one hand and his tablet in the other. Both screens were glowing with an ominous red lock icon. What is happening? Marcus yelled, his voice cracking with panic. He leaped down the stairs. Every single device I own just froze. My tablet, my phone, my business laptop. They are all locked out. There is a red screen demanding an encryption key. Vanessa spun around, her eyes wide with sudden terror. Marcus, what are you talking about? My presentation files, Marcus shouted, his face contorting in sheer desperation. He shook his tablet violently. The entire pitch deck for the Boston acquisition is encrypted. The backup files are locked. I have a massive virtual meeting in exactly 3 hours. If I cannot access those documents, the deal is completely dead. He turned his furious gaze toward me, his chest heaving. Clara, fix this. Fix this right now. Whatever firewall game you are playing, turn it off. I leaned against the glass railing of the staircase, thoroughly enjoying the sheer panic radiating from his body. I am not playing any games, Marcus. Your lovely wife decided to commit a federal cybercrime by intentionally accessing and attempting to destroy a computer she did not own. She triggered the encryption protocol. I suggest you thank her for her brilliant technical intervention. Vanessa gasped, her hands flying to her mouth. I did not know, Marcus. I swear. I thought it was her work computer. I was just trying to delete her files to teach her a lesson. You idiot, Marcus roared, completely abandoning his polished marketing executive persona. He threw his locked tablet onto the nearest sofa in disgust. Do you have any idea what you have just done? My entire agency is riding on this pitch. He pulled a secondary older cell phone from his pocket, a burner phone he used for emergencies. His hands shook so badly he dropped it twice before finally dialing a number. David. Marcus pleaded into the phone, his voice dropping to a desperate whisper as he turned his back to us. David, please listen to me. I need a 48-hour extension on the pitch delivery. My entire network just crashed. A massive server failure. There was a pause. Marcus gripped the window frame tightly. I know the terms, David, Marcus begged, his voice cracking with undeniable fear. But you have to give me more time. If this loan does not come through by Friday morning, my entire agency will inevitably default. I am completely broke right now, David. I am drowning in massive hidden debt that my family knows absolutely nothing about. If the investors pull out of this deal, I will lose absolutely everything. I stared at the security monitor, watching the chaos unfold downstairs. The high-definition audio picked up every panicked word. Marcus was pacing frantically near the glass coffee table, his designer shoes scuffing my imported rugs. David, please, Marcus begged into his burner phone, his voice completely devoid of its usual arrogant swagger. I just need 48 hours. My entire agency network is down, a massive firewall error. If you pull the funding now, the Sterling Group deal collapses and I will be entirely bankrupt. He paused, listening to the voice on the other end. He wiped a bead of sweat from his forehead. I know I missed the last 2 payments, Marcus pleaded, his voice cracking. But I have assets. My wife's family has money. I can secure the loan. Just do not call in the debt today. He ended the call and slumped onto the sofa, burying his face in his hands. Vanessa stood nearby, completely frozen, processing the reality that her wealthy husband was drowning in hidden debt. I closed the security app and walked out of the study, feeling a profound sense of clarity. The pieces were finally falling into place. I marched downstairs and entered the living room. Marcus jumped up, his eyes darting nervously. Vanessa immediately pointed an accusing finger at me. You did this, she screamed, her voice shrill and desperate. You intentionally broke his devices. You are trying to ruin us. I did not force your husband to take out predatory business loans he could not repay, I replied evenly, crossing my arms. And I certainly did not force him to embezzle funds from his marketing agency to pay for your lavish lifestyle, Vanessa. Richard and Evelyn, who had been lingering in the kitchen, rushed into the living room at the sound of the commotion. "What is going on here?" Richard demanded, looking between Marcus and me. "What is this about embezzling funds?" I turned to my parents. "Marcus just confessed to a private lender on a burner phone. He is completely broke, Dad. His marketing firm is defaulting on a massive loan, and he has been hiding it from all of you. He is 3 days away from total bankruptcy." I expected shock. I expected outrage. I expected my parents to turn on Marcus for lying to them, for jeopardizing Vanessa's financial security. Instead, my father's face hardened, and he turned his glare entirely on me. "You were listening to his private phone calls." Richard snapped, his voice thick with disgust. "You spied on him in your own house. I have security cameras in the main living areas," I stated, genuinely taken aback by his reaction. "Which I explicitly warned you about. The issue here is not my security system. The issue is that your son-in-law is committing financial fraud." "Keep your voice down," Evelyn hissed, looking frantically toward the shattered patio door, as if the neighbors might hear. She marched over and grabbed my arm tightly. "You are going to fix this, Clara. Right now." "Fix what?" I asked, pulling my arm out of her painful grip. "I cannot fix his debt." "Yes, you can," Richard insisted, stepping closer, closing ranks with Marcus and Evelyn. "You just bought this massive beach estate. You clearly have substantial liquidity. You are going to take out a mortgage on this property and wire the funds to Marcus's agency by tomorrow morning." I stared at him, my mind struggling to process the sheer audacity of his demand. "You want me to mortgage my home, the home I bought with my own hard-earned savings, to bail out a man who just tried to vandalize it? We are talking about protecting the family name," Evelyn said, her voice dripping with toxic urgency. "If Marcus goes bankrupt, Vanessa loses her social standing. The country club will find out. Our reputation in Chicago will be entirely ruined. You are going to do this for your sister." "Absolutely not," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "I will not give Marcus a single dime. He is a fraud, and I am not funding his failures." Vanessa burst into theatrical tears, burying her face in Marcus's chest. "She has always hated me," Vanessa sobbed loudly. "She wants to see me lose everything. She is just a bitter, jealous spinster." "I am not jealous," I countered, looking directly at my sister. "I am responsible. I warned you about Marcus before the wedding. I told you his financial models were unstable. You told me I was just jealous of his success." "Enough!" Richard roared, his face turning an ugly shade of purple. He stepped so close to me I could smell the stale coffee on his breath. "You have been a constant disappointment to this family, Clara. You hoarded your money while we struggled to pay for Vanessa's wedding. You locked us out of the bedrooms. You humiliated your mother, and now you are refusing to help save the family legacy." "This is not a legacy," I replied, standing my ground despite the intimidation tactic. "This is a cover-up, and I am not participating." Richard's eyes narrowed into dark, vicious slits. He turned to Evelyn and grabbed his coat from the accent chair. "Pack the bags, Evelyn. We are leaving." "Leaving?" Evelyn asked, confused. "But where will we go? We do not have money for a hotel." "We are going to the local courthouse," Richard announced, his voice carrying a dark, calculated threat. "I am tired of this girl thinking she controls everything just because her name is on a piece of paper. We are going to take care of this ownership issue permanently." He grabbed Marcus by the shoulder and shoved him toward the front door. "Come on, we have legal business to handle." I watched the two men storm out of the house, the heavy wooden door slamming shut behind them. Vanessa stopped crying instantly. She wiped her dry eyes, shot me a venomous smirk, and followed them outside. Evelyn lingered for a moment, shaking her head in profound disappointment. "You brought this entirely on yourself, Clara," she muttered bitterly before walking out. I locked the door behind them and leaned against the solid wood, my heart racing. I did not know what Richard was planning at the courthouse, but I knew my father. He was greedy, desperate, and completely unbedded by moral boundaries. I immediately walked into the study, bypassing the useless decoy laptop, and unlocked the heavy mahogany desk drawer. I pulled out my physical security key and booted up my primary encrypted workstation. I needed to secure every single digital asset I owned. If Richard thought he could manipulate the legal system to steal my house, he was going to find out exactly why I was the top financial analyst in my firm. I spent the next 3 hours fortifying my offshore accounts, transferring the bulk of my liquid assets into highly secured, heavily encrypted trusts. I printed out the official LLC ownership documents for the beach house, placing them in a crisp manila folder on the kitchen counter. When the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long, dark shadows across the ocean, I saw the headlights of their black SUV sweep across the driveway. They were back, and they were not alone. Two marked police cruisers pulled in right behind them, their blue and red lights flashing ominously in the twilight. I stood frozen by the kitchen counter, watching the rhythmic flash of blue and red police lights paint the walls of my living room. The heavy tires of the two marked cruisers crunched against the gravel, coming to a halt directly behind Marcus's luxury SUV. The heavy vehicle doors opened in unison. Richard and Marcus stepped out first, their postures radiating a sickening level of arrogant confidence. Evelyn and Vanessa followed closely behind them, wearing identical expressions of smug satisfaction. Finally, two local Maine police officers emerged from their respective vehicles. They adjusted their duty belts and followed my father toward the front porch. Richard marched up the wooden steps, leading the procession like a conquering general, returning to claim his territory. He pointed aggressively at my front door, speaking rapidly to the older of the two officers. I could not hear his exact words through the thick glass, but his frantic, exaggerated gestures painted a clear picture of his fabricated victimhood. I took a slow, deep breath, anchoring myself in the present moment. I picked up the crisp manila folder containing my legitimate LLC ownership documents from the marble kitchen island. I walked toward the entryway with measured, deliberate steps. I unlocked the heavy oak door and pulled it open just as the lead officer raised his hand to knock. "Good evening, ma'am," the older officer said, his tone polite but guarded. "I am Officer Miller and this is Officer Davies. We received a call regarding a property dispute at this residence." "Good evening, officers," I replied evenly, keeping my posture relaxed and my voice entirely devoid of panic. "I am Clara Jenkins. How can I help you?" Marcus immediately shoved his way past the officers, his face twisted into an ugly sneer. "Tell them the truth, Clara. Tell them how you maliciously locked us out of the bedrooms and tried to extort us for money in our own house. This property belongs to the Jenkins Family Trust," Richard declared loudly, stepping up beside Marcus and puffing out his chest. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded sheaf of papers. "My daughter has been undergoing a severe mental health crisis. She is confused and acting erratically. We came up here to secure the property for the family, and she has been holding us hostage in the downstairs living room. We want her removed from the premises immediately for her own safety and ours." Evelyn chimed in from the bottom of the porch steps, clutching her designer handbag to her chest. "She is completely unstable, officers. She cut off the power to the kitchen and tried to starve us. We are terrified of what she might do next." Officer Miller held up a hand to silence my dramatic family. He turned his attention back to me, his expression hardening slightly. "Ma'am, these gentlemen have presented us with legal documentation indicating that this estate is officially owned by a family trust managed by Richard Jenkins. They claim you are a guest who has unlawfully restricted their access to the property. I need to ask you to step outside onto the porch." Ms. Jenkins, Officer Davies added, his hand resting casually near his heavy radio. "We need to sort this out here to ensure everyone stays calm." I did not argue. I stepped out into the cool evening air, pulling the front door shut behind me until it clicked securely into its smart lock. I stood on the wooden planks of the porch, surrounded by the flashing police lights and the hostile glares of my own blood relatives. Richard crossed his arms over his chest, shooting me a cold, victorious smirk. He truly believed he had won. He believed his aggressive intimidation tactics and false narrative would force me to surrender my sanctuary. "May I see the documentation my father provided?" I asked Officer Miller, my voice unwavering. The officer hesitated for a brief second before handing me the folded papers. I opened them slowly. It was a standard quitclaim deed printed on bright white paper that looked like it had been freshly generated at a local copy shop down the highway. The document explicitly stated that Clara Jenkins willingly relinquished all ownership rights of the beach house to the Jenkins Family Trust. At the bottom of the page, my signature was scrawled in dark blue ink. It was a decent forgery, mimicking the wide loop of my cursive letters, but it completely lacked the sharp, aggressive angles I naturally used when signing legal documents. "This is a very impressive piece of fiction," I stated, looking directly into my father's eyes. Richard's smug smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but he quickly recovered, masking his panic with manufactured outrage. "Listen to her," Richard scoffed, turning to the officers with wide eyes. "She is completely delusional. She signed that transfer deed a month ago when she realized she could not afford the property taxes. Now she is trying to back out of the legal agreement because she wants to hurt her sister." I turned my attention back to Officer Miller, holding the forged document out so the bright porch light illuminated the bottom corner. "Officer Miller, are you familiar with the legal requirements for a notarized property transfer deed in the United States?" The officer frowned, looking at the paper. "Yes, ma'am. It requires a signature and a notary stamp to verify the signer." "Exactly," I agreed. "I suggest you look closely at this stamp. Marcus and Richard made a fatal error when they printed this fraudulent document." "You are looking at a notary seal registered in Illinois," I explained loudly. "However, I have not set foot in Illinois recently. Look at the handwritten date I instructed. It is October 12th. On that exact day, I suffered a physical collapse. I was confined to the intensive care unit in Chicago. I was physically incapable of holding a pen. I have the hospital records to prove it." I handed a folder to Officer Miller. "This file contains my hospital discharge paperwork from Chicago. The dates overlap entirely with the handwritten date on that fraudulent quitclaim deed. I also included the articles of incorporation for my holding company, proving my absolute ownership. I never transferred this house. They fabricated this document." Officer Miller took the folder. He clicked his flashlight, shining the beam onto the medical records and documents. He spent a minute cross-referencing the dates and registry seals. His jaw tightened. He handed the fake deed to Officer Davies. Davies examined the forged paper and shook his head in disbelief. His friendly demeanor vanished. He turned his stern gaze toward my father. "Mr. Jenkins." Officer Miller began, his voice dropping into a hard, authoritative tone. "Do you have an explanation for why you presented a forged document to a sworn police officer to unlawfully remove a property owner?" Richard took a step backward, his arrogance evaporating. The color drained from his face. He looked at Marcus, then at the officers, his hands trembling. "Hands. There must be a clerical mistake." Richard stammered, his voice pitching high with sudden terror. "I did not forge anything. I am a respected businessman. Presenting a forged deed to law enforcement is not a clerical mistake," Officer Davies stated, stepping closer. "It is a felony in Maine. It carries a penalty of up to 5 years in prison and a substantial fine. You are facing charges for forgery and fraud." The word prison hung in the chilly air like a weight. Evelyn let out a strangled gasp, clutching Vanessa tightly. Vanessa looked horrified, staring at her husband. "I did not make that document," Richard shouted, his self-preservation instincts kicking in. He shoved Marcus forward, throwing his son-in-law directly into the line of fire. "Marcus gave me the paperwork. He told me his legal team drafted the transfer. He had a private notary sign off on it. I just printed it out. This is his fault." Marcus stumbled forward, his eyes wide with panic. "Richard, you cannot be serious!" Marcus yelled, his voice cracking. "We planned this together. You told me we needed leverage to force Clara to mortgage the house. You told me to find a template online." Both officers unclipped their radios. Officer Miller reached for his handcuffs. "Gentlemen, you are both confessing to a conspiracy to commit felony fraud. I need you both to turn around and place your hands behind your backs." "Wait!" I interjected, stepping off the porch and walking toward the officers. My voice was calm, cutting through the frantic chaos of my family. The officers paused, looking at me with professional curiosity. I have absolutely zero desire to spend the next 6 hours sitting in a police precinct filling out extensive criminal reports. I came to this isolated beach house to heal from severe exhaustion. A lengthy legal ordeal tonight counteracts my recovery. However, I do want this hostile situation resolved permanently. What exactly are you proposing, Ms. Jenkins? Officer Miller asked, keeping a watchful eye on them. I will decline to press felony forgery charges tonight, I stated, watching the immediate wave of relief wash over my father. Under one strict, non-negotiable condition. I want you to issue a formal documented criminal trespassing warning to all 4 of these individuals right now. I want their names, their identification, and this entire incident logged into your official system. If they ever step foot on my property without my written consent, I want them arrested immediately for trespassing. Officer Miller considered my proposal. He looked at his partner, who offered a subtle nod. It was a clean, efficient solution that avoided an administrative headache for the department while securing my absolute safety. We can certainly do that. Officer Miller agreed. He pulled a thick citation pad from his pocket and turned a hardened glare toward my family. I need identification from all 4 of you right now. For 15 minutes, my family stood in humiliated silence. The flashing blue and red lights illuminated their defeated faces as the officers processed their driver licenses. Evelyn kept her eyes glued to the gravel driveway, too embarrassed to look at the police. Vanessa sniffled quietly, her perfect vacation ruined. Marcus and Richard avoided eye contact, the silent tension between them thick with mutual betrayal. Officer Miller handed back their identification cards, along with 4 bright yellow carbon copy slips. You have been officially warned, the officer stated firmly. You are hereby criminally trespassed from this estate. The 2 officers returned to their cruisers. We watched the vehicles turn around, their headlights sweeping across the dark ocean waves before disappearing down the long gravel road. The heavy silence of the isolated Maine coastline settled over us. I stood on the porch looking down at the 4 people who had spent my entire life draining my energy, my finances, and my spirit. They looked small, cold, and entirely powerless. Well, I announced, breaking the quiet tension. You heard the officers. You are no longer permitted to be on my property. The coastal highway is exactly 5 miles down that dirt road. I suggest you all start walking. It gets quite cold out here on the coast at night. Evelyn suddenly burst into heavy theatrical tears. Clara, please, she desperately begged, her voice visibly trembling. We simply cannot walk 5 miles in the pitch dark. We have massive suitcases. We do not have a hotel. We do not have any money for a taxi tonight. You absolutely cannot throw your own mother out into the street. I crossed my arms, looking at them with zero sympathy. You have 2 options. I declared, my voice ringing with absolute unyielding authority. You can drag your heavy bags to the highway right now, or you can step inside and sign a manual labor contract. You will physically earn your right to sleep on my sofas tonight by working off your debt tomorrow. The crisp morning air carried the scent of salt and pine through the open window of the master suite. I finished the last sip of my coffee, feeling a profound sense of satisfaction. I had successfully reclaimed my sanctuary. My family was trapped in a financial and legal nightmare entirely of their own making. I walked over to my tablet to check the security feeds, a new morning routine I was surprisingly starting to enjoy. I tapped the screen, pulling up the wide-angle view of the downstairs living area. I expected to see Vanessa and Marcus sulking on the linen sofas, nursing sore backs, and complaining about their lack of luxury accommodations. Instead, the living room was completely empty. I frowned, switching the camera feed to the kitchen, then the foyer, and finally, the wraparound deck. Nothing. The house was dead quiet. I zoomed in on the kitchen island. The manila folder containing the forged deed and my actual LLC ownership documents was still sitting exactly where I had left it. I panned the camera slightly to the right. My heart skipped a beat. The heavy sliding glass door leading to the patio, the one Richard had shattered yesterday morning, was wide open. I did not panic. I systematically checked the remaining exterior cameras. The driveway feed showed Marcus's luxury SUV parked exactly where he had left it, the morning dew glistening on the dark paint. They had not left the property. I pulled up the camera overlooking the private beach path. I finally spotted them. All four of them were huddled together near a cluster of large weathered rocks at the edge of the property line. They were talking animatedly, their gestures frantic and secretive. I tapped the screen, activating the localized audio feed from the discreet landscaping microphone hidden nearby. The audio hissed with the sound of crashing waves, but their voices cut through clearly. "We cannot just walk away," Marcus was saying, his voice strained and desperate. "Clara has documents proving I committed a felony. If she goes to the police, my agency is done. I am done. I need those papers destroyed today." "You are acting like a coward," Richard snapped, pointing a thick finger at his son-in-law. "I told you we just need to find her actual leverage. That girl is hoarding money. If she bought this massive estate in cash, she has millions stashed somewhere. We just need to find her account information." "And what exactly do you plan to do if you find it?" Evelyn asked, her voice laced with anxious skepticism. "You cannot just call her bank and ask for a withdrawal. She has everything locked down behind firewalls and smart security." Vanessa crossed her arms, shivering in the cool morning breeze. "Dad is right, Mom. Clara is too arrogant. She thinks she is invincible because she has a security system, but she is not careful. She left that fake laptop right on the coffee table. If she has physical documents, they are hidden somewhere in that house. We just have to find them." "We need to get into her study," Marcus insisted, pacing back and forth on the wet sand. "I noticed a heavy mahogany desk when we first arrived. If she has physical security keys, offshore account details, or hard copies of the LLC documents, they are in that desk. If I can get my hands on her account numbers, I can use them as collateral to secure my agency loan. I just need the account numbers and her signature." Richard nodded slowly, a dark, calculating expression settling over his features. "The police said we were trespassed from the property, but Clara specifically offered us a deal last night. She said we could sign a manual labor contract to earn our stay." Evelyn gasped, her eyes widening in horror. "You want us to sign a contract to become her personal maids? I absolutely will not scrub toilets for that ungrateful girl." "It is a tactical move," Evelyn, Richard hissed, grabbing her arm. "We sign the contract. We pretend to submit to her ridiculous demands. It gives us unrestricted access to the lower floor without risking immediate arrest. While you and Vanessa keep her distracted with the cleaning tasks, Marcus and I will find a way to bypass the study door and crack that desk. We find the financial documents, secure the loan, and then we leave her here with nothing." I listened to their pathetic criminal conspiracy with a cold, detached fascination. They were not just greedy. They were actively plotting identity theft and major financial fraud right in my own backyard. They honestly believed they were brilliant strategists, outsmarting a naive younger sister. They had no idea they were walking directly into a meticulously designed trap. I stepped away from the tablet and walked to the large walk-in closet. I pulled on a pair of comfortable yoga pants and a simple gray sweater. If they wanted to play the role of indentured servants to infiltrate my study, I was going to provide them with an unforgettable employment experience. I walked down the glass staircase, making sure my footsteps were loud enough to announce my presence. By the time I reached the kitchen, the patio door was sliding shut. My family stepped inside, their faces instantly morphing into masks of defeated compliance. "Good morning, Clara," Richard forced out, his voice thick with fake humility. "We spent the night thinking about your offer. You were right. We behaved poorly. We would like to accept your terms and work off our debt today." I walked over to the kitchen island and picked up a stack of freshly printed papers. I had drafted the manual labor contracts late last night, anticipating they would eventually crack under the pressure of having nowhere else to go. I slid the papers across the marble counter toward them. "These are standard liability and labor agreements," I announced smoothly. "By signing these documents, you acknowledge your financial debt to me for unauthorized occupancy and property damage. You agree to perform physical labor today in exchange for a temporary lifting of the police trespassing order. This agreement expires at exactly sunset tonight." Marcus grabbed a pen and signed the document without bothering to read a single line. Richard quickly followed suit. Vanessa and Evelyn hesitated, exchanging a disgusted look before reluctantly signing their names. "Excellent," I said, collecting the papers. I walked over to the utility closet near the foyer and pulled out two large, heavy-duty metal buckets filled with harsh chemical cleaning supplies, stiff bristled brushes, and thick rubber gloves. I dropped the buckets onto the hardwood floor with a loud, authoritative thud. "Evelyn, Vanessa, you are on deep cleaning duty," I instructed, pointing to the buckets. "You will start with the 4 guest bathrooms on the lower level. I want the grout scrubbed with a toothbrush. When you finish the bathrooms, you will move to the wraparound deck. The sea salt has caused some buildup on the glass railings. You will wash every single pane by hand." Evelyn stared at the yellow rubber gloves as if they were covered in toxic sludge. "You cannot seriously expect me to scrub a toilet," she whispered, her voice trembling with genuine shock. "I have not cleaned a bathroom in 30 years. "Then I suggest you consider this a valuable refresher course," I replied coldly. I remember being 16 years old, forced to spend my entire weekend scrubbing the floors and cleaning up the massive mess after Vanessa hosted a lavish birthday party for 50 of her high school friends. You told me it was my duty to support my sister. Now it is your duty to earn your keep. Vanessa grabbed a bucket, her face twisted in absolute misery. "Come on, Mom," she muttered bitterly. "Let us just get this over with." I turned my attention to Marcus and Richard. The men stood up straighter, trying to look capable and ready for action. "Marcus, Richard, you are on exterior debris management," I announced. The recent coastal storms washed up several massive waterlogged tree trunks and heavy debris onto my private beach. You will physically move that debris away from the shoreline and stack it neatly near the property line. It is heavy, exhausting work. I suggest you pace yourselves. We can handle a little yard work, Richard scoffed, rolling up the sleeves of his expensive linen shirt. Just point us toward the beach. I watched them march out the back door, their false confidence radiating through the kitchen. They thought they had secured the perfect distraction. They thought I would be entirely focused on monitoring Evelyn and Vanessa scrubbing the bathrooms. They had no idea that I had spent the last hour deliberately leaving the door to my study slightly ajar. I walked back upstairs and settled into my chair in the master suite. I pulled up the primary security feed on my large monitor. I switched the view to the high-definition camera hidden in the smoke detector of the study. The heavy mahogany desk sat in the center of the room, looking vulnerable and unguarded. I smiled, tapping my fingers against the armrest. I knew Marcus would not be able to resist. He was desperate, bankrupt, and arrogant enough to believe he could outsmart me. The trap was set. All I had to do was wait for him to take the bait. I did not have to wait long. Through the high-definition camera hidden in the smoke detector, I watched the heavy mahogany door of my study slowly creak open. Marcus slipped inside. He was covered in sweat and sand from dragging driftwood across the beach. He wiped his dirty forehead with the back of his hand and glanced nervously over his shoulder before pulling the door shut. He thought he was being incredibly stealthy. He moved like a clumsy thief in a bad movie. He sprinted toward this massive desk in the center of the room. He began yanking the drawers open one by one. I watched him rifle through blank stationery, charging cables and spare pens. His frustration mounted with every empty compartment. He muttered curses under his breath, violently shoving the drawers back into place. He leaned over the desk, placing his hands on the leather blotter. As he shifted his weight, his expensive sneaker caught the edge of the woven area rug beneath the chair. The corner of the rug flipped back, revealing the brushed steel cover of the floor safe I had explicitly requested the contractor install. Marcus froze. His eyes widened as he stared at the metallic square set flush into the hardwood floor. He dropped to his knees, ignoring the sand falling from his clothes onto my pristine floor. He eagerly pulled the steel cover back to reveal the digital keypad. He rubbed his hands together like a cartoon villain. I leaned forward in my chair upstairs, sipping my coffee. The safe was a high-end model. It allowed exactly 5 incorrect attempts before triggering a permanent biometric lockdown. Marcus pressed the first sequence of numbers. A harsh electronic beep echoed through the quiet room, followed by a flashing red light. He had tried my birth year. How deeply unoriginal. He paused, chewing his bottom lip. He punched in a second sequence, another harsh beep and a red flash. He tried Vanessa's birthday. Then he tried my parents' anniversary. Beep, beep. He was down to his final attempt. Marcus sat back on his heels, running a trembling hand through his hair. He was sweating profusely now, panic setting in. He knew if he triggered the lockout alarm, the siren would alert everyone in the house. He stood up, pacing the small room in frantic circles. He ran his hands along the bookshelves looking for a hidden clue. Then his desperate eyes landed on the small woven trash can sitting innocently beside the desk. I smiled, taking another slow sip of my coffee. I had prepared the trash can meticulously last night. Among a few discarded receipts in a torn envelope rested a bright yellow sticky note. I had crumpled it up to make it look like a discarded afterthought. Marcus dropped to his knees and dumped the contents of the trash can onto the floor. He smoothed out the receipts before snatching up the yellow sticky note. He flattened the crumpled paper against his thigh. I watched his face light up as he read the 6 digits I had scrawled in black ink. It was a completely random sequence, but to a desperate man it looked like pure salvation. He crawled back to the floor safe. His fingers trembled as he punched the digits into the keypad. The light flashed a brilliant green. The heavy steel bolts retracted with a deep, satisfying clack. Marcus let out a breathless laugh of pure triumph. He pulled the heavy door open. Inside rested a single thick leather folder. I had spent 2 hours fabricating the documents inside. They were perfectly crafted replicas of offshore banking statements, holding company ledgers, and international wire transfer confirmations. Every document bore my name, my forged signature, and the logo of a highly exclusive Cayman Islands financial institution. The total asset value listed on the summary page was exactly $5 million. Marcus pulled the folder out and flipped it open. The high-resolution camera captured his eyes bulging as he read the bottom line. He brought a hand to his mouth, completely stunned. $5 million. He whispered the number aloud, as if saying it would make it real. He flipped through the pages, greedily examining the account numbers, the routing codes, and the verified balance statements. He pulled his burner phone from his pocket and rapidly snapped photographs of every single page. He made sure to capture the offshore account numbers and the authorization signatures with perfect clarity. He shoved the documents back into the leather folder and tossed it into the safe. He slammed the heavy steel door shut, scrambling to cover it back up with the woven rug. He kicked the discarded trash back into the bin and sprinted out of the study. I switched my tablet screen back to the exterior beach camera. I watched Marcus sprinting across the sand, tripping over his own feet in his haste to reach Richard. My father was currently struggling to lift a waterlogged branch. Marcus grabbed his arm violently, pulling him behind a massive rock outcropping away from the sweeping view of the lower deck where Evelyn and Vanessa were scrubbing glass. I tapped the audio feed. "Richard, look at this!" Marcus gasped, shoving his phone screen directly into my father's face. I got into the safe. I found her offshore accounts. She has $5 million sitting in the Cayman Islands untouched. Richard dropped the heavy branch. He snatched the phone from Marcus, staring at the digital photos. $5 million, Richard repeated, his voice thick with raw, naked greed. I knew she was hiding money. I knew it. That ungrateful brat has been sitting on a fortune while we struggled to pay bills. I will have the funds wired tomorrow afternoon, Marcus promised. We are using her identity to secure my loan, Marcus whispered. Richard smirked, nodding agreement. They were walking straight into the identity theft trap I built. I sat at the massive oak desk in the study watching the primary monitor. Marcus was pacing near the glass coffee table downstairs, his expensive leather shoes scuffed impatiently against the imported rug. He held a sleek silver tablet in his right hand. A heavy gold watch gleamed on his wrist. He tapped the screen, connecting a video call. He adjusted his collar and forced a confident, easy smile. "David, thank you for making the time," Marcus said, his voice projecting arrogant charm. "I know my agency missed the last 2 loan payments. I experienced a minor banking error, but I am ready to secure the remainder of the debt today. I have collateral." I watched the screen intently. Marcus believed he was speaking directly to a senior underwriter at his private lending firm in Boston. He believed he had successfully bypassed the firewall on the guest network. He was completely wrong. I had manipulated the main routing protocols of the house network 30 minutes ago. When Marcus initiated the video call, I seamlessly diverted his connection straight into a secure, isolated server I controlled. The man Marcus saw on his tablet screen was not David the underwriter. The face on the screen was a highly sophisticated AI-generated avatar. I programmed the digital persona to mirror the exact appearance and vocal cadence of his actual lender using public profiles and voice cloning software. The digital avatar nodded slowly on the screen. Let us see the collateral, Marcus. I need absolute verification if I am extending your deadline. Marcus practically vibrated with excitement. He held up a thick stack of printed papers toward the tablet camera. I had ensured he found a working printer in the hallway specifically for this moment. I have verified holding statements from a secure offshore account in the Cayman Islands, Marcus announced proudly, shuffling the papers. The total liquid asset value is $5 million. I am listing my agency as the primary beneficiary. The funds are readily available. The AI avatar scrutinized the documents on the screen. The account holder listed is Clara Jenkins. Is she a partner in your firm? Marcus let out a dismissive laugh. Clara is my sister-in-law. She is a silent partner. She officially transferred management of these accounts to me this morning. She signed the authorization herself. He held up a remarkably convincing forgery of my signature. He had clearly spent the last hour meticulously copying the handwriting from the fake quitclaim deed. This authorization allows you to draw directly from these specific accounts, the AI avatar prompted, guiding him perfectly into the trap. Exactly. Marcus confirmed, his voice dripping with greedy anticipation. I am authorizing a $2 million wire transfer to cover the agency loan and provide operational capital. You can begin the underwriting process immediately. The AI avatar offered a tight, professional smile. I have recorded the details of this transaction, Marcus. We will process the information. Expect an update by Friday. Marcus disconnected the call. He threw his arms up in the air, letting out a loud, triumphant cheer. He tossed the forged documents onto the coffee table and sprinted toward the kitchen. Vanessa, we did it, he yelled, his voice echoing through the lower floor. We got the extension. The $2 million transfer is processing. Vanessa dropped the scrub brush she was holding. She ripped off her yellow rubber gloves and threw her arms around his neck. They spun around in a joyous, celebratory embrace. I told you she was not as smart as she thinks she is. Vanessa laughed, kissing him soundly. We are going to save the agency, and we are going to use her own hidden money to do it. This is absolutely perfect. I sat back in my plush leather chair upstairs. I saved the video file of the entire interaction. I now possessed a high-definition, crystal-clear recording of Marcus openly committing federal wire fraud and identity theft. He had explicitly stated his intention to illegally draw funds from accounts he did not own using a forged signature. I uploaded the video file to a secure encrypted cloud server. I linked the file to the local police report detailing the forged deed incident from yesterday. The evidence was irrefutable. It was a complete, airtight case for major financial crimes. Marcus and Vanessa were still celebrating in the kitchen. Richard and Evelyn hurried inside, drawn by the commotion. Did it work? Richard demanded, his eyes wide with desperate hope. Did you secure the collateral? It worked perfectly, Marcus bragged, puffing out his chest. The underwriter accepted the offshore documents. We will have $2 million in liquid capital by the end of the week. My agency is completely saved. Evelyn clasped her hands together, her face lighting up with genuine relief. Oh, thank heavens, she breathed. I knew you could handle this, Marcus. You are a brilliant businessman. We need to celebrate, Marcus announced, his confidence fully restored. We cannot sit around this depressing house eating cold leftovers. We need a proper dinner, a victory dinner. You are absolutely right, Richard agreed, patting Marcus heavily on the back. We deserve a celebration. We beat her at her own game. I watched the four of them revel in their imaginary victory. They were practically vibrating with smug satisfaction. They truly believed they had outmaneuvered me. They thought they had secured a massive fortune. I stood up from my desk. The trap had closed perfectly. They had willingly provided every single piece of evidence I needed to completely destroy them. It was time to pull the trigger. It was time to drop the hammer and shatter their pathetic delusions of grandeur permanently. I walked out of the study and headed for the glass staircase. I pulled out my phone and navigated to my contact list. I found the number for Marcus, the marketing executive whose identity theft scheme had just been recorded. I tapped the call button. The phone rang twice before he answered. Clara, Marcus said, his voice dripping with false concern. We were just talking about you. We know you are upset, but Richard thinks we should all sit down and talk. I let out a soft laugh. There's nothing to talk about, Marcus. I just wanted to personally congratulate you on securing that loan extension. A $2 million wire transfer by Friday. That is quite an accomplishment. The line went dead silent. How do you know about that? Marcus asked, his voice suddenly sharp and panicked. You were not in the room. I am the one who set up the network, Marcus, I replied smoothly. And I am the one who routed your video call to a secure server. I heard everything. I saw the forged documents. I have a full recording of you committing identity theft. You are bluffing. Marcus stammered, his bravado entirely gone. You cannot prove anything. I do not need to bluff, I stated. I have already uploaded the video file to a secure cloud server linked to the local police report. I will hand the evidence to the FBI first thing tomorrow morning. Clara, please. Marcus begged, the desperation raw and unfiltered. You cannot do this. If that loan does not come through, my agency is finished. I will lose everything. You should have thought about that before you tried to steal my money, I replied coldly. You have exactly 30 minutes to pack your bags and leave my property. If you are not gone by then, I will not wait for tomorrow morning. I will call the police right now. I hung up the phone without waiting for his response. The chaos erupted almost immediately. The sound of shouting and slamming doors echoed through the house. I watched the security feed as Marcus frantically shoved clothes into his suitcase, completely ignoring Vanessa's tearful questions. Richard and Evelyn were in the hallway, arguing loudly. I told you this was a mistake, Evelyn shrieked, pointing an accusing finger at Richard. She planned this. She trapped us. Shut up, Evelyn. Richard snapped, his face pale and drawn. We need to get out of here before she calls the cops. I leaned against the glass railing of the staircase, a small, satisfied smile playing on my lips. They were finally realizing the gravity of their situation. At exactly 28 minutes, the front door burst open. Richard, Evelyn, Vanessa, and Marcus stumbled out onto the porch, dragging their heavy suitcases behind them. They looked like a group of defeated refugees, their polished veneer completely shattered. I walked downstairs and stood in the open doorway. The cool night air swept in, carrying the scent of the ocean. You have 2 minutes, I announced, checking my watch. Vanessa turned to me, her face streaked with tears and mascara. You ruined my life, Clara, she sobbed. You are a monster. I simply gave you exactly what you asked for, I replied evenly. You wanted to play games with my property and my money. Now you have to deal with the consequences. Marcus grabbed Vanessa's arm and practically dragged her toward the driveway. Come on, he muttered, not looking back. We need to go. Richard and Evelyn followed closely behind, their heads bowed in humiliated silence. They dragged their luggage across the gravel, the wheels crunching loudly in the quiet night. As they reached the edge of the property line where the gravel met the paved coastal highway, Marcus stopped and turned around. He looked at me, a mixture of hatred and fear in his eyes. You have not heard the last of this, Clara, he yelled, his voice carrying over the distance. I will find a way to make you pay. I did not respond. I simply watched them walk down the highway, their figures slowly disappearing into the darkness. The next morning, the sun rose over the ocean, casting a brilliant golden light across the water. I stood on the balcony of the master suite, breathing in the fresh, salty air. The house was silent, peaceful, and entirely mine. I had reclaimed my sanctuary. I had successfully defended my property and my assets from the very people who should have protected them. My phone buzzed on this patio table. It was an email notification. The FBI had confirmed receipt of the automated file drop containing the fraud evidence against Marcus. I smiled a genuine, relaxed smile. The investigation would be swift and brutal. Marcus's agency would inevitably collapse, taking his entire fraudulent empire down with it. Vanessa would have to face the reality of her husband's crimes. Richard and Evelyn would be forced to downsize their lavish lifestyle and live with the consequences of their enabling behavior. I had finally broken the toxic cycle. I had finally proven that my worth was not determined by their ability to exploit me. I turned back towards the ocean, the sound of the crashing waves filling the silence. I had a lot of healing to do, a lot of life to rebuild. But for the first time in years, I was completely free. I was exactly where I belonged, and no one would ever be able to take that away from me again. The evening air was thick with the scent of roasted garlic and aged wine. The massive dining table, which I had personally assembled from reclaimed driftwood, was set with fine china and crystal glasses. I stood in the shadow of the hallway watching the security monitor on my tablet. Marcus was pacing the length of the living room, adjusting the collar of his designer shirt and checking his gold watch every 30 seconds. He was vibrating with an anxious, greedy energy. He truly believed he had secured a $2 million lifeline. He believed he was about to host a dinner that would solidify his status as a wealthy, untouchable executive. Evelyn was bustling around the kitchen, barking orders at Vanessa. The entire counter was covered with an extravagant spread of catered food. She had ordered massive platters of fresh oysters, prime rib, and truffles from the most exclusive private chef in Kennebunkport. I knew for a fact she had put the entire $5,000 catering bill on a high-interest credit card, fully convinced Marcus would pay it off by Friday. "Make sure the silver is polished, Vanessa," Evelyn instructed, her voice sharp and urgent. "These men Marcus invited are top-tier Boston investors. They are old money. They expect absolute perfection. We need them to see that we are peers, not desperate petitioners." Vanessa grumbled, wiping down a silver serving tray. "I do not understand why Clara is letting us do this. She locked us out of the bedrooms, made us scrub the deck like common laborers, and now she is just letting us host a luxury dinner party in her house. It does not make any sense." "She finally realized she lost," Richard declared, walking into the kitchen and snatching an oyster off a platter. He swallowed it whole, a smug look of satisfaction on his face. "She knows Marcus secured the loan. She knows we have the capital now. She is intimidated. That girl always folds when she realizes she is outmatched." I smiled, a cold, calculated expression. They were so blinded by their own arrogance, so eager to believe their own narrative, they could not see the massive trap closing around them. The doorbell rang, a sharp, clear chime that echoed through the first floor. Marcus nearly jumped out of his skin. He smoothed his jacket and practically sprinted to the entryway. "They are here," Marcus hissed over his shoulder. "Everyone be on your best behavior. These men manage multi-million-dollar portfolios. We need to project absolute stability." I watched the camera feed as Marcus pulled the heavy oak door open. 3 men stood on the porch. They were dressed in impeccably tailored suits, projecting an aura of quiet, immense wealth. The lead investor, a tall man with silver hair named Thomas Vance, stepped inside. "Thomas, it is fantastic to see you," Marcus gushed, extending his hand eagerly. "Welcome to our coastal estate. I am so glad you and your partners could make the drive up from Boston." Thomas did not take the offered hand. He stepped past Marcus, his eyes sweeping across the grand foyer and the expansive living room. His 2 partners followed, their expressions entirely neutral, offering Marcus nothing more than a curt, obligatory nod. Marcus awkwardly dropped his hand, his smile faltering slightly. "Please come into the dining room. We have prepared an exceptional spread. We have a lot of exciting financial opportunities to discuss this evening." I decided it was time to join the party. I stepped out from the hallway, dressed in a simple, elegant black sheath dress. I walked directly into the center of the living room, projecting absolute authority. "Good evening, gentlemen," I announced, my voice cutting cleanly through the ambient noise of the house. Marcus spun around, his eyes narrowing in instant annoyance. "Clara, not right now. I am hosting an important business meeting. Go back to your room." He turned back to the investors, attempting a dismissive laugh. I apologize. My sister-in-law has been struggling with some personal issues recently. We are just letting her stay here to rest. Thomas Vance stopped walking. He ignored Marcus completely. He turned his full attention to me. A wide, genuine smile broke across his usually stern face. He stepped forward, bypassing Marcus, and extended both of his hands toward me. "Clara Jenkins," Thomas said, his voice booming with profound respect. "It has been entirely too long. When you sent the encrypted invitation this morning, I canceled my entire schedule. I told my partners if the most ruthless financial analyst in Chicago calls a meeting in Maine, we drop everything and attend." The room went dead silent. The clinking of silver in the kitchen stopped abruptly. Marcus stared at Thomas, his mouth hanging slightly open. You know her." "Know her." The second investor, a sharp-eyed man named David, let out a booming laugh. "Marcus, your sister-in-law, restructured my entire corporate portfolio 3 years ago. She saved my firm from a hostile takeover and doubled our quarterly revenue. She is a legend in the financial district. We owe half our current liquidity to her aggressive forecasting," the third investor added, nodding deeply in my direction. "It is an absolute honor to be hosted in your home, Clara." Evelyn and Richard slowly walked out of the kitchen, their faces pale, their eyes darting between me and the 3 powerful men treating me like royalty. Vanessa stood frozen, clutching a silver tray, looking as though she had just been slapped. "I do not understand," Marcus stammered, looking frantically from Thomas to me. "Clara is a baker. She sells cupcakes. She just had a mental breakdown. You cannot possibly be talking about the same person." "A baker." Thomas looked at Marcus with profound, unfiltered pity. Clara Jenkins managed billions of dollars in assets before she retired. She is the founder and primary shareholder of Elysium Holdings. I assumed you knew this, considering you invited us to her private estate. The color drained from Marcus's face completely. He looked like he was going to be physically sick. He finally realized that the women he had spent the last 2 days mocking, threatening, and attempting to defraud was not a vulnerable target. "Please, gentlemen, take a seat in the dining room," I directed smoothly, ignoring my family's total shock. "We have a very important presentation this evening. I think you will find the material highly illuminating." I walked toward the head of the massive dining table. The 3 investors followed me immediately, taking the prime seats. Marcus stumbled after them, his previous arrogance replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. Richard and Evelyn trailed behind, their faces masks of confusion and mounting dread. I picked up my tablet from the table. I tapped a single button. The massive 80-inch smart TV mounted on the dining room wall flared to life. The screen illuminated the room, casting a stark blue light across the faces of my family. "Gentlemen," I began, my voice steady and commanding, "Marcus invited you here tonight to discuss securing capital for his marketing agency. He claims his business is thriving and requires expansion funds. However, before you consider any financial involvement, I feel obligated to share a brief presentation regarding his current operational ethics." I tapped the screen again. The video file I had secured earlier that day began to play in high definition. The massive TV screen filled with the image of Marcus pacing in my living room, clutching his tablet. The audio was crystal clear. "David, please." Marcus's recorded voice echoed through the dining room. "I know I missed the last 2 payments, but I have assets. My wife's family has money. I can secure the loan. Just do not call in the debt today." Marcus lunged forward, his face contorted in panic. "Turn it off, Clara. Turn it off right now." I tapped my screen, muting the audio from the hidden camera. I did not need to hear another word. The trap was set perfectly primed for Marcus to walk directly into his own destruction. I stood up, smoothing the wrinkles from my yoga pants, and walked over to the tall windows overlooking the driveway. 2 luxury sedans were turning off the coastal highway, crunching onto the gravel path leading up to my house. They were not police cruisers this time. They were sleek, understated vehicles driven by men who preferred their wealth to remain quiet, but their influence absolute. I recognized the silver Mercedes immediately. It belonged to David Harrington, the senior partner at Boston's most aggressive private equity firm. The black Audi trailing behind him was driven by Robert Vance, a man whose real estate acquisitions spanned the entire East Coast. The third man stepping out of the passenger side of the Mercedes was Arthur Sterling, the very CEO Clara's family had desperately tried to pitch their failing marketing firm to just last month. I had contacted all three of them the previous evening, sending a highly encrypted file containing a localized market analysis of Marcus's agency, complete with the undeniable proof of his imminent default. I also included a personal invitation to dinner at my new Maine estate. When Clara Jenkins, the woman who had personally restructured their portfolios and shielded them from a massive market crash 2 years ago, called a meeting, they showed up without question. I watched as the three men walked toward the front door. They were exactly on time. I turned away from the window and headed downstairs, moving with deliberate, measured steps. In the kitchen, chaos reigned. Evelyn was frantically barking orders at Vanessa, who was struggling to arrange an extravagant seafood platter she clearly had no idea how to present. The rich, salty smell of freshly steamed lobster clashed violently with the sharp scent of lemon and expensive herbs. Marcus was pacing the length of the open-concept living room, adjusting the collar of a fresh, wrinkle-free designer shirt he must have pulled from his luggage. He looked like a man who believed he had just conquered the world, vibrating with a toxic, greedy energy. "They are here," Marcus hissed, catching sight of the men approaching the porch through the expansive front windows. "Everyone look busy but relaxed. We need to project absolute stability and success. This is the moment we solidify the agency's future." I stepped off the bottom stair and leaned casually against the glass railing, crossing my arms over my chest. I said absolutely nothing, choosing to remain in the periphery watching his performance unfold. Marcus practically sprinted to the heavy oak door, pulling it open with a practiced, arrogant flourish. He plastered on a wide, welcoming smile, extending his hand enthusiastically toward the three powerful men standing on the porch. "Gentlemen, welcome to our coastal estate," Marcus announced, his voice dripping with forced charm. "I am so thrilled you could make the drive up from Boston. Please come inside. We have an exceptional evening planned for you." David Harrington, the private equity partner, stepped over the threshold first. He did not look at Marcus. He did not extend his hand to accept the greeting. His sharp, calculating eyes swept across the foyer, moving past the expensive decor and landing directly on me. "Clara," David said, his voice carrying a deep, resonant tone of genuine respect. He bypassed Marcus entirely, walking straight toward the staircase. "It is a pleasure to see you again. When you sent the encrypted invitation, we canceled our weekend plans immediately." Arthur Sterling followed closely behind, offering a curt nod to a bewildered Marcus before turning his full attention to me. "The market analysis you attached to your email was brilliant, Clara. Ruthless as always, but entirely accurate. We are eager to hear your proposal." Marcus dropped his extended hand, his confident smile shattering into a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. He stood frozen by the open door, his eyes darting frantically between me and the three investors who were treating me like royalty. You know her," Marcus stammered, his voice cracking slightly. He looked at Thomas, the third investor, who had just walked inside. "You know my sister-in-law." Thomas let out a short, incredulous laugh. He looked at Marcus as if the man had just spoken a foreign language. "Know her?" Marcus. "Clara Jenkins managed billions of dollars in assets before she retired. She single-handedly saved my firm from a hostile takeover 3 years ago. She is the founder of Elysium Holdings. She is a legend in the Chicago financial district." The color drained completely from Marcus's face. He looked like he had been struck by lightning. His eyes widened, fixing on me with a sudden, horrifying realization. He finally understood that the woman he had spent the last 2 days mocking, threatening, and attempting to defraud was not a vulnerable target. She was the apex predator of the very financial ecosystem he was desperately trying to survive in. Evelyn and Richard stepped out of the kitchen, drawn by the commotion. They stopped dead in their tracks, staring at the three powerful men deferring to me. Vanessa dropped a silver serving spoon, the clatter echoing loudly in the tense silence of the room. "I do not understand," Evelyn whispered, her hands fluttering nervously. "Clara is just an analyst. She just had a breakdown." "A breakdown?" David Harrington turned his sharp gaze toward my mother, his expression laced with profound disdain. Madame Clara orchestrated the most complex corporate acquisition of the decade. She did not have a breakdown. She executed a strategic exit after securing a fortune that most people cannot even comprehend. I uncrossed my arms and stepped forward, fully assuming command of the room. I ignored my family's stunned silence. "Gentlemen, please take a seat in the dining room," I directed smoothly, gesturing toward the massive table I had assembled. "We have a very important presentation this evening. I think you will find the material highly illuminating." I walked toward the head of the table. The three investors followed me, immediately taking the prime seats. Marcus stumbled after them, his legs looking unsteady, his previous arrogance entirely replaced by pure terror. Richard and Evelyn trailed behind, their faces masks of confusion and mounting dread. I picked up my tablet from the table. I tapped a single button. The massive 80-inch smart TV mounted on the dining room wall flared to life. The screen illuminated the room, casting a stark blue light across the pale faces of my family. "Gentlemen," I began, my voice steady and commanding, "Marcus invited you here tonight to discuss securing capital for his marketing agency. He claims his business is thriving and requires expansion funds. However, before you consider any financial involvement, I feel obligated to share a brief presentation regarding his current operational ethics." I tapped the screen again. The video file I had secured earlier that day began to play in high definition. The massive TV screen filled with the image of Marcus pacing in my living room, clutching his tablet. The audio was crystal clear. "David, please," Marcus's recorded voice echoed through the dining room. "I know I missed the last two payments, but I have assets. My wife's family has money. I can secure the loan. Just do not call in the debt today." Marcus lunged forward across the dining table, his face contorted in absolute panic. "Turn it off, Clara. Turn it off right now." I tapped my tablet screen, immediately pausing the high-definition video on the massive display. The frozen frame showed Marcus begging the AI avatar I had created. The grand dining room immediately fell into a suffocating silence. Marcus leaned heavily over the reclaimed wood table, struggling to catch his breath. The three Boston investors remained perfectly seated, their expressions hardening into masks of absolute disgust. Thomas Vance folded his hands neatly on the table. "You are attempting to use stolen offshore account documents to secure a commercial loan, Marcus. You deliberately plan to commit federal identity theft to cover your agency deficit." "No," Marcus stammered, his voice cracking violently. He stood up completely straight, wiping sweat from his forehead. "That video is manipulated. It is a deep fake. Clara is a vindictive hacker. She fabricated that entire conversation to destroy my agency." "I did not fabricate the police report," I stated calmly. I swiped my finger across the tablet screen. The frozen video of Marcus vanished instantly, replaced by the digitized official police incident report from yesterday evening. The document detailed the forged quitclaim deed, complete with Officer Miller's badge number, and the explicit felony forgery warnings issued to both Marcus and Richard. Arthur Sterling slowly read the text projected on the wall. "A forged property deed." Arthur noted, his voice dripping with pure contempt. "You attempted to steal your sister-in-law's estate using fraudulent legal documents, and when that failed, you attempted to steal her identity to defraud a private lender. This goes far beyond poor financial management, Marcus. This is severe criminal conduct." Vanessa let out a scream. She backed away from her husband, her hands trembling wildly. "You lied to me," Vanessa shrieked, her voice echoing off the high ceilings. "You told me the agency was just experiencing a minor cash flow problem. You told me we were safe. You dragged me into a federal crime, Marcus." "Shut up, Vanessa." Marcus snapped his polished facade, completely disintegrating. He turned his desperate, frantic eyes back to the investors. Gentlemen, please. You have to understand the pressure I am under. The market has been incredibly difficult, but my agency has solid fundamentals. With your capital injection, we can overcome this minor liquidity crisis and generate massive returns. David Harrington let out a harsh laugh. You want our capital, Marcus? We do not invest in criminals. We came here tonight because Clara Jenkins invited us. We thought we were discussing a legitimate acquisition opportunity orchestrated by Elysium Holdings. Speaking of Elysium Holdings, I interrupted, walking slowly around the edge of the large dining table. I stopped right behind Marcus's chair. I did not invite these gentlemen here simply to expose your pathetic attempt at fraud, Marcus. I invited them here as witnesses for a formal financial transaction. Marcus spun around to face me, his eyes wide with renewed terror. What are you talking about? Your private lender in Boston, the real David, was extremely anxious about your missed payments, I explained smoothly. He was actively looking to offload your distressed debt to mitigate his own firm's risk exposure. Distressed debt is a particular specialty of mine. I tapped my tablet one final time. The police report on the screen vanished. A highly detailed commercial debt acquisition contract appeared in its place. The document bore the official seal of Elysium Holdings. 2 days ago, my holding company officially purchased the entire debt portfolio of your marketing agency, I announced, my voice ringing with undeniable authority. I own your debt, Marcus. I am officially your primary creditor. Marcus stumbled backward, his designer shoes catching on the edge of the woven rug. He hit the wall, his mouth opening and closing without producing a sound. As your primary creditor, I am formally notifying you that your grace period has officially expired, I declared. You are in direct violation of the original loan covenants due to fraudulent activity. I am calling in the debt immediately. The full balance is due right now. You are entirely bankrupt, Marcus. Your agency belongs to me, and I plan to liquidate it by Monday morning. Evelyn suddenly rushed forward, pushing past a stunned Richard. She threw herself between Marcus and the investors, wearing a desperate, manic smile. Gentlemen, please, Evelyn begged, clasping her hands together in a theatrical display of pleading. You must ignore this ridiculous family drama. Clara has always been incredibly jealous of Vanessa's marriage. She is just trying to create a scene to ruin our evening. Marcus is a brilliant marketer. If you just write the check, we can handle Clara privately. Thomas Vance stood up from the table. He buttoned his suit jacket, his face a portrait of absolute repulsion. Evelyn, your complete detachment from reality is genuinely terrifying, Thomas stated coldly. We do not write checks to mitigate family drama. We certainly do not fund men facing federal indictments. David and Arthur stood up immediately, following Thomas's lead. Clara, the market analysis you provided was flawless as always, Arthur said, turning to me with a respectful nod. We will not be investing in this agency, but we remain highly interested in your future ventures. Please contact my office when you are ready to return to the market full-time. Thank you, Arthur, I replied gracefully. Have a safe drive back to Boston. The three men walked out of the dining room without sparing a single glance at Marcus or my parents. The heavy front door opened and closed firmly, sealing their departure. The silence that followed was suffocating. Marcus slid down the wall, pulling his knees to his chest. He buried his face in his hands, completely broken. Vanessa stood frozen, weeping silently as the reality of her new bankrupt life crashed down around her. Evelyn looked at Richard, waiting for him to fix the unfixable disaster. Richard took a sudden, sharp breath. He grabbed his chest with both hands, his face contorting into a mask of sudden, extreme agony. He let out a loud, dramatic groan and stumbled forward, crashing onto the hardwood floor. He clutched his tailored shirt, thrashing wildly. Richard dropped to his knees, his hands locked in a death grip over his chest. His face contorted into a terrifying mask of agony as he let out a strangled, breathless cry. He collapsed onto the dining room floor, his body thrashing wildly against the imported hardwood. Evelyn immediately dropped the silver serving tray she had been clutching. It clattered loudly against the floor, but the sound was completely swallowed by her piercing, hysterical scream. Richard! Evelyn shrieked, dropping to her knees beside him. Someone call an ambulance. My husband is having a massive heart attack. He is dying. Vanessa burst into fresh, violent tears, hovering helplessly over her father. Dad, please hold on. Clara, do something. Call 911 right now. I did not panic. I did not rush to his side. I pulled my smartphone from the pocket of my cardigan and smoothly dialed the local emergency services number. I stood perfectly still, watching the performance unfold on the dining room floor. Yes, I need an ambulance at the Jenkins residence, I stated calmly into the phone, providing the address. I have an adult male reporting severe chest pain and apparent cardiac distress. I disconnected the call and slid the phone back into my pocket. I leaned against the massive dining table, crossing my arms as I looked down at my father. He was putting on a truly spectacular, Oscar-worthy performance. He groaned loudly, his eyes squeezed shut, his chest heaving with exaggerated, rapid breaths. You are killing him, Clara, Evelyn sobbed, stroking his forehead frantically. This stress is too much for his heart. You orchestrated this entire evening just to torture us, and now you have practically murdered your own father. I am not murdering anyone, Mom, I replied evenly, my voice devoid of even a fraction of an ounce of sympathy. I am simply watching him execute the exact same manipulation tactic he has used for the last 20 years. Vanessa looked up at me, her tear-stained face twisted in pure hatred. How can you be so incredibly cold? Look at him. He needs a doctor. He needs an audience, I corrected her, tapping my fingers against my arm. Do you remember when I was 16, Vanessa? I had a 103-degree fever and severe pneumonia. I could barely breathe. Mom had a luxury spa appointment downtown. She refused to drive me to the urgent care clinic because she did not want to lose her deposit. She told me to walk the 2 miles in the freezing rain. She said I was just being dramatic. Evelyn's head snapped up, her eyes flashing with defensive anger despite her husband's supposed medical emergency. That was completely different. You were a teenager. You were exaggerating. I spent 4 days in the hospital on an IV drip, I reminded her, my voice dropping to a dangerous, icy whisper. And right now, my father is faking a major medical crisis because he realizes he is completely trapped. He is trying to halt this confrontation and buy himself time. It is pathetic. Richard let out another loud, shuddering groan, clutching his chest tighter. The wail of approaching sirens echoed in the distance, growing rapidly louder as the emergency vehicles sped down the coastal highway. The heavy front door had remained unlocked after the investors departed. 2 local paramedics burst into the foyer, hauling heavy medical bags and a portable EKG machine. They rushed into the dining room, immediately dropping beside Richard. Sir, can you hear me? The lead paramedic asked, rapidly attaching vital monitors to Richard's chest and wrist. We are going to check your heart rhythm right now. Try to take slow, steady breaths. The room fell into a tense, suffocating silence. The paramedic watched the digital readout on the portable monitor for 30 agonizing seconds. His frantic, urgent demeanor slowly dissolved into a look of profound professional confusion. He tapped the screen, checking the connections, then looked at his partner. His heart rate is slightly elevated, but his rhythm is perfectly normal, the lead paramedic announced, his brow furrowing. His blood pressure is stable. Oxygen saturation is at 99%. Sir, are you experiencing any numbness in your left arm or pain radiating up your jaw? Richard opened his eyes, the theatrical agony instantly vanishing from his face. He looked at the perfectly healthy readouts on the monitor, realizing his performance had completely failed. No, he muttered gruffly, sitting up and pushing the paramedic's hands away. I think it was just a severe panic attack. The stress of the evening. The lead paramedic let out a heavy, irritated sigh. He began detaching the monitors. A panic attack. Sir, we deployed a full emergency response unit for a suspected cardiac event. Your vitals are completely baseline. We will be billing you for the emergency call-out, sir. The second paramedic added, his tone dripping with absolute annoyance. He handed Richard a clipboard. Sign here to refuse transport. Richard grabbed the pen and scribbled his signature, his face burning a deep, humiliating crimson. The paramedics packed up their equipment in tense silence and marched out of the house, clearly disgusted by the blatant waste of municipal resources. The heavy oak door clicked shut behind them. I uncrossed my arms and stepped forward, standing directly over my father. He refused to look at me, staring stubbornly at the hardwood floor. "The performance is officially over, Richard," I announced, my voice slicing through the lingering tension. "You failed to steal my house. Marcus failed to steal my identity, and you just failed to manipulate your way out of the consequences." I pulled out my phone and held it up, displaying the digital timer I had just activated. "You have exactly 30 minutes to pack whatever belongings you dragged into my home," I declared, my voice echoing with final, absolute authority. "If you are not entirely off my property when this timer hits 0, I will hit send on the email I drafted to the FBI. It contains the video of Marcus committing wire fraud, the forged quitclaim deed, and the full account of your conspiracy. 30 minutes. The clock starts now." The digital countdown on my phone screen glowed with a bright red light. 29 minutes and 50 seconds remained. The absolute finality of my statement hung in the dining room air, suffocating the last remnants of their arrogant pride. Marcus was the first to move. He scrambled up from the hardwood floor, no longer caring about his wrinkled designer shirt or his carefully curated image. He bolted past me without making eye contact, his dress shoes slipping against the smooth floorboards as he sprinted for the staircase. Vanessa snapped out of her frozen shock. She let out a guttural, furious scream and chased right after her husband. "You lied to me," Vanessa shrieked, her voice echoing violently up the stairwell. "You promised me we had millions. You promised me we were expanding the agency. You dragged me into a crime and bankrupted us. I am going to divorce you the second we get back to Chicago." Marcus ripped his jacket out of her grip. He did not bother to defend himself. He just kept running toward the second-floor guest suite. Richard scrambled to his feet, the fake heart attack forgotten. He looked at Evelyn, expecting her to follow him with her usual blind loyalty. Instead, Evelyn slapped him hard on the shoulder. "This is entirely your fault," Evelyn spat, her face contorting with unfiltered rage. "You told me Marcus was a financial genius. You told me we could use Clara to save our social standing. Now we are being thrown out into the street, and I have $5,000 of catering debt on my personal credit card. You ruined our lives." "I did not ruin anything," Richard roared, his face turning a volatile purple. "I was trying to save this family from bankruptcy. If you had just controlled your ungrateful daughter, we would be securing that $2 million wire transfer tomorrow morning. Do not you dare blame me for this disaster." They pushed past each other, hurling vicious insults as they hurried up to the second floor. The grand unified family facade had completely evaporated. Underneath the expensive clothes and the country club manners, they were just four greedy, desperate people turning on each other like trapped animals. I walked slowly up the stairs, my phone held loosely in my hand. I leaned against the doorframe of the hallway, watching the absolute chaos unfold in the guest suites. 24 minutes remained. Vanessa was throwing her clothes into her massive suitcase, weeping hysterically while cursing Marcus. Marcus ignored her completely. He was frantically sweeping his toiletries and electronics into his leather duffel bag, his hands shaking so violently he dropped his electric razor twice. In the opposite room, Richard and Evelyn were aggressively shoving their belongings into their bags, fighting over who had to carry the heaviest items. 15 minutes, I announced loudly. My voice cut through the sounds of sobbing and zipping luggage. The timer is still running. Marcus froze near the doorway of his suite. His desperate, darting eyes landed on the hallway wall right next to his bedroom. I had decorated the corridor with several pieces of original localized artwork. He was staring directly at a small, framed coastal watercolor painting. I had purchased the piece from a renowned local artist for $4,000. I watched him closely. I knew exactly what was going through his mind. He was completely broke. His accounts were frozen. His agency was entirely bankrupt. He needed liquid cash to survive the weekend. Marcus glanced toward the stairs, thinking I was still on the lower level. He reached out his trembling fingers, gripping the wooden frame. He lifted it off the mounting hook and quickly moved to shove the painting into his open leather duffel bag. "Put the painting back on the wall, Marcus," I commanded, stepping fully into the hallway. Marcus jumped, nearly dropping the artwork. He spun around, his face pale with sudden terrifying realization. He clutched the frame to his chest, trying to block it from my view. I was just admiring it. Marcus stammered, his voice pitching high with panic. I bumped into it when I walked out of the room. I was just fixing the frame. I raised my phone and pointed the camera lens directly at his guilty face. I tapped the screen, recording a fresh video. You were actively attempting to conceal a $4,000 original piece of artwork inside your personal luggage. I stated clearly, ensuring the audio picked up every single word. That constitutes felony grand larceny in the state of Maine. I am adding this video file directly to the email draft destined for the FBI. You just upgraded your identity theft charges to include stolen property. Marcus let out a pathetic whimpering sound. He practically threw the painting back onto the wall hook. It hung slightly crooked, but I did not care. He zipped his leather duffel bag shut and backed away, holding his hands up in surrender. 10 minutes, I announced, dropping my phone back into my pocket. Get your bags and get downstairs right now. The panic amplified tenfold. Evelyn struggled to lift her oversized suitcase, cursing loudly when Richard refused to help her. Vanessa dragged her luggage out of the suite, the heavy wheels bouncing aggressively against the hardwood floor. They moved like a chain gang, entirely defeated and thoroughly humiliated. They hauled their heavy bags down the glass staircase, grunting and sweating under the weight of their own extravagant possessions. I followed them down, watching the digital timer tick away the final agonizing seconds. 5 minutes, I called out, gesturing toward the heavy oak front door. Your time is officially up. Richard grabbed the brass handle and yanked the door open. The night air rushed into the foyer. They stumbled onto the porch, dragging their massive suitcases. They expected to load their belongings into Marcus's luxury SUV. Instead, they froze. A heavy tow truck was actively hitching up his prized vehicle. Vanessa rushed forward, grabbing Marcus by the arm, trying to physically drag him toward the kitchen. She looked wildly at the front door, half expecting the police to burst back in. We need to go right now. Vanessa sobbed, her voice a high, frantic whine. She is not joking. She will send that email. Evelyn practically shoved Richard toward the stairs. The dramatic fake heart attack was completely forgotten in the face of imminent federal charges. They moved like a panicked herd, scrambling up the glass staircase, their designer shoes thudding loudly against the steps. I leaned against the dining table, watching the digital timer count down. 26 minutes. The sounds of pure, unadulterated chaos drifted down from the second floor. It was the beautiful symphony of my toxic family finally collapsing under the weight of their own consequences. I could hear drawers being ripped open, zippers violently catching on overstuffed luggage, and the continuous bitter stream of recriminations they hurled at each other. I told you not to take that painting, Marcus, Vanessa shrieked from the hallway. You are literally trying to drag me to prison with you. Do not act like you are innocent, Marcus roared back. You cheered when I got the account documents. You were ready to spend that money tomorrow. Both of you shut up and pack, Richard bellowed, his voice straining with exertion. Evelyn, leave the shoes. We cannot fit all of them. Just take the essentials. I am not leaving my designer heels in this house, Evelyn screamed back, her priorities remaining stubbornly intact even in the face of absolute disaster. I picked up my tablet and switched the view to the second-floor hallway camera. The dynamic had completely shattered. They were functioning entirely on self-preservation now. There was no loyalty, no family bond, no shared sense of superiority. They were just four cornered rats fighting over the last scrap of food. 20 minutes. Marcus dragged his heavy leather duffel bag out of the guest suite. He looked disheveled, his expensive shirt untucked, his tie hanging loosely around his neck. He paused near the top of the stairs, looking down at the foyer. He was calculating his exit, trying to figure out if he could salvage any shred of dignity. He could not. Vanessa followed him, dragging her massive, oversized suitcase. She was crying so hard she was practically hyperventilating. She glared at Marcus's back, realizing the wealthy, successful man she had married was nothing more than a desperate fraud. 15 minutes. Richard and Evelyn finally emerged from their suite. Richard was sweating profusely, hauling 2 large bags. Evelyn clutched her expensive handbag to her chest, her face pale and drawn. She looked 10 years older than she had when she arrived just yesterday. They began the arduous process of dragging their luggage down the glass staircase. The wheels bounced aggressively against each step, the noise echoing through the empty house. I met them at the bottom of the stairs, my phone in hand, the timer displaying exactly 12 minutes. "You made excellent time," I noted smoothly. "You still have 12 minutes to clear the property line." Evelyn stopped at the bottom of the stairs. She looked at me, a mixture of profound betrayal and lingering arrogance in her eyes. "You planned this from the very beginning," Evelyn hissed, her voice trembling. "You invited us here just to destroy us." "I did not invite you, Mom," I reminded her, keeping my tone perfectly level. "You invited yourselves. You broke into my house, vandalized my property, attempted to steal my identity, and tried to defraud me of millions of dollars. I simply let you dig your own graves." "You are a terrible daughter," Richard spat, glaring at me as he dragged his bags toward the door. "We are family. We are supposed to protect each other." "You protected yourselves," I countered. "You always have. And now you have to face the real world without my bank account to cushion your fall." Marcus pushed past Richard, eager to escape the suffocating tension of the house. He grabbed the brass handle of the heavy oak door and yanked it open. The cool, salty night air rushed in, carrying the sound of the crashing ocean waves and the loud, distinct hum of a heavy diesel engine. Marcus froze on the porch. He dropped his leather duffel bag. "What is that?" Vanessa asked, stepping out behind him. I followed them onto the porch, a slow, deeply satisfying smile spreading across my face. A massive flatbed tow truck was parked squarely in the middle of my crushed gravel driveway. The bright yellow hazard lights flashed rhythmically, illuminating the sleek black luxury SUV that Marcus had proudly driven up from Chicago. A burly man in a reflective vest was actively securing heavy metal chains to the rear axle of the SUV. The winch whined loudly as it began to pull the expensive vehicle up onto the slanted flatbed. "Hey!" Marcus yelled, sprinting down the porch steps. He waved his arms frantically. "Hey, stop right there! What are you doing? That is my car!" The tow truck driver paused, wiping his hands on a greasy rag. He looked Marcus up and down, completely unimpressed by the frantic executive. "Are you Marcus Vance?" the driver asked gruffly. "Yes, I am," Marcus demanded, puffing out his chest. "And you need to unhook my vehicle right now." The driver pulled a clipboard from his belt and checked the top sheet of paper. "I have a direct repossession order from the primary leasing agency in Chicago. You are 3 months behind on your payments, buddy. This vehicle is officially bank property." Marcus went completely rigid. All the remaining fight drained out of his body. He looked at the tow truck driver, then at his SUV, and finally back at Vanessa, who was staring at him with absolute, unadulterated horror. "A repossession," Vanessa whispered, her voice cracking. She looked at me, realizing the full extent of her husband's financial ruin. "You knew about this too." "I own his debt, Vanessa," I reminded her simply. "I know exactly how broke he is." The driver hopped down from the cab of the truck. He began securing thick nylon straps over the front tires of the SUV, whistling a cheerful, entirely out-of-place tune. Vanessa let out a noise that sounded like a dying animal. She dropped her massive suitcase on the porch, her hands flying to her head. "My purse!" Vanessa shrieked, sprinting down the porch steps. "My purse is still in the front seat. Stop! Let me get my things out." The tow truck driver held up a hand, completely unbothered by her panic. "Sorry, lady. Once the vehicle is hooked up, it is officially in the possession of the bank. I cannot let you take anything out of the interior. You will have to contact the impound lot in Portland on Monday to arrange for the retrieval of your personal property." "Portland!" Vanessa screamed, looking frantically at Marcus. "That is an hour away. My wallet is in that car, Marcus. All my credit cards, my identification." "It does not matter," I called out from the top of the porch steps, leaning casually against the wooden railing. "Your credit cards are all frozen anyway, Vanessa. Marcus maxed them out, trying to keep his agency afloat. I suggest you get comfortable walking in those designer heels." Marcus looked completely defeated. He did not fight the driver. He did not yell at me. He just stood there staring blankly at the dark asphalt of the coastal highway as the heavy winch pulled his prized possession onto the flatbed. It was the final undeniable confirmation of his complete failure. The tow truck driver finished securing the chains. He climbed back into the cab, the heavy diesel engine roaring to life. The bright yellow hazard lights flashed one last time before the truck pulled onto the highway, carrying Marcus's last remaining symbol of wealth away into the dark Maine night. A profound, heavy silence settled over the driveway. The only sounds were the crashing of the ocean waves and Vanessa's quiet, broken sobbing. Evelyn slowly turned around to face me. The haughty, arrogant matriarch was completely gone, replaced by a terrified, desperate woman. She walked up the first 2 steps of the porch, clutching her handbag tightly to her chest. "Clara, please!" Evelyn begged, her voice cracking, completely stripped of its usual commanding tone. "We have absolutely nothing. No car, no money. It is pitch black outside and it is freezing. You cannot just leave us stranded on a gravel driveway in the middle of nowhere." "You are not stranded," I corrected her, checking the screen of my phone one last time. "The highway is right there. The nearest town is 5 miles south. You have 2 healthy legs, Evelyn. I suggest you start walking." "Please," Evelyn sobbed, taking another step up. "Just one night. Let us sleep on the floor. Let us sleep in the kitchen. We will leave at first light. We will figure out a rental car. Just do not force us out into the cold." I looked down at her, feeling absolutely nothing. No pity, no guilt, no lingering sense of familial obligation. Just the cold, hard clarity of a woman who had finally learned to prioritize her own survival. "Do you remember the night I called you from Chicago?" I asked softly, stepping slightly closer to the edge of the porch. I was sitting in a hospital bed hooked up to a heart monitor. I had just suffered a major physical collapse. I asked if you could fly out to be with me, just for one night. Evelyn's face flushed a deep, shameful red. She looked away, unable to meet my eyes. "You told me you could not possibly miss Vanessa's engagement party tasting." I reminded her, the memory no longer causing pain, only serving as a factual record of her priorities. "You told me to stop being dramatic. You told me to ask a nurse for help if I was really that scared." "I was wrong," Evelyn whispered, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "I was so wrong, Clara. I am sorry." "You are only sorry because you are the one standing outside in the cold," I replied evenly. "I told you to leave. Your 30 minutes are up." I stepped back, pulling the heavy oak door shut. "Clara, please!" Evelyn shrieked, throwing her hands against the wood. "Do not do this." I engaged the smart lock. The heavy deadbolt slid into place with a loud mechanical clack, sealing the house perfectly. I turned around, leaning my back against the solid wood. The house was completely silent. It was a deep, resonating quiet that I had not experienced since they first barged through the door. I walked over to the massive dining table and picked up my tablet. I switched the view to the exterior security cameras. The 4 of them were standing in the driveway, illuminated only by the faint glow of the porch lights. Vanessa was sitting on her suitcase, her face buried in her hands. Marcus was staring out at the dark ocean, completely motionless. Richard and Evelyn were arguing again, their voices muffled by the thick, insulated glass of the windows. Eventually, Richard grabbed his heavy bag and began dragging it down the long, crushed gravel driveway. Evelyn followed him, her designer shoes crunching loudly against the stones. Marcus reached down and pulled Vanessa up by her arm. They grabbed their remaining luggage and trailed behind my parents, a miserable, defeated procession, heading toward the dark, desolate highway. I watched the screen until their figures disappeared completely into the shadows. They were gone. My phone buzzed in my hand. I glanced down at the screen. It was an automated email confirmation from the federal server. "File transfer successful. Law enforcement tip received and logged." I locked my phone and set it down on the table. The trap had closed perfectly. The debt was called. The evidence was secured. The toxic cycle was permanently broken. I was finally truly free. 2 months passed in a blur of restorative silence and deliberate healing. The crisp autumn air slowly replaced the summer heat, rolling off the Maine coast. My strength returned completely. The burnout that had crippled my body in Chicago felt like a distant, unpleasant memory. I established a new rhythm, waking up without an alarm, enjoying my coffee on the third-floor balcony, and managing my financial portfolio entirely on my own terms. The security cameras remained active, but the feeds were mostly quiet now. The driveway stayed empty. The heavy smart locks engaged and disengaged exactly as I programmed them. My fortress had successfully repelled the invaders and then transformed back into a sanctuary. News from Chicago trickled in through my legal and financial contacts. The fallout from the disastrous weekend in Maine had been absolute and uncompromising. Marcus had been officially indicted on multiple federal charges, including identity theft, wire fraud, and grand larceny. The FBI moved swiftly, seizing his remaining assets and completely dismantling his agency. He was currently awaiting trial, his reputation in the marketing world entirely destroyed. The investors he had tried to impress had actively cooperated with the authorities, ensuring he would never work in the financial sector again. Vanessa, faced with the horrific reality of her husband's crimes and the total loss of her luxurious lifestyle, had filed for divorce. She moved out of their sprawling house before the bank officially seized it. According to the updates I received, she was currently living in a tiny, cramped one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of the city, working as a junior event coordinator for a minor firm. The golden child was finally experiencing the real world, stripped of the financial safety net I had unknowingly provided for so long. Richard and Evelyn's fall from grace had been equally spectacular. They had heavily relied on Marcus to elevate their social standing, and his public indictment dragged them down with him. The country club had quietly requested they resign their membership. Facing mounting debts and the loss of my financial support, they were forced to sell their pristine suburban home. They downsized to a modest condo, relying primarily on Social Security and whatever small investments Richard had managed to salvage. Evelyn had attempted to call me exactly once since the night I locked them out. The voicemail was a pathetic, transparent attempt at reconciliation, filled with vague apologies and desperate pleas for financial assistance. I deleted it without listening to the end. The boundary I had established on the porch that night remained absolute. I owed them nothing. I sat on the balcony on a bright Tuesday morning, a warm mug of dark roast coffee in my hands. The ocean stretched out endlessly before me, the waves crashing rhythmically against the shore. I inhaled deeply, filling my lungs with the clean, salty air. I heard a soft, rhythmic crunching sound on the gravel driveway below. I leaned over the glass railing, expecting to see a delivery driver. Instead, I saw a woman with kind eyes and silver hair walking up the path. She was carrying a small wicker basket. I recognized her from the local grocery store. Her name was Margaret, and she owned the property 3 miles down the coastal highway. I walked downstairs and opened the heavy oak door. "Good morning, Clara," Margaret said cheerfully, holding out the basket. Inside rested a jar of homemade blueberry jam and a loaf of fresh sourdough bread. "I know you value your privacy, but the local community association is hosting a clam bake this Saturday at the town hall. We would love for you to join us. No pressure, of course. Just wanted to officially welcome you to the neighborhood." I looked at the basket, then at Margaret's warm, genuine smile. There were no hidden motives in her eyes, no underlying expectations of financial favors or unearned loyalty. It was a simple, authentic gesture of community. "Thank you, Margaret," I replied, accepting the basket. "That is incredibly kind of you. I think I would really enjoy a clam bake. I will be there." "Wonderful," Margaret beamed. "We will look forward to seeing you. Enjoy the bread." She walked back down the driveway, waving before climbing into her sensible station wagon. I stood in the doorway, the warm bread resting in my hands. For the first time in 32 years, I felt a profound sense of belonging. I had spent my entire life trying to buy the respect and love of a family that only saw me as a resource. I had exhausted myself trying to fit into a dynamic that was fundamentally broken. Now I was building a life entirely separate from that toxicity. I was surrounding myself with people who respected my boundaries and valued my presence without demanding my money. I closed the front door, the smart lock engaging with a reassuring, solid click. I walked back upstairs to the master suite and stepped out onto the balcony one last time. The massive 3-story beach house was entirely mine, Every room, every view, every quiet corner belonged to me. I had reclaimed my wealth through decisive, unyielding action. I had reclaimed my sanity by cutting the cancer of my family out of my life permanently. And most importantly, I had reclaimed my future. The ocean breeze swept past me, carrying the promise of a life lived entirely on my own terms. I took another sip of my coffee, savoring the rich, dark flavor. I looked out at the horizon, a slow, triumphant smile spreading across my face. The taste of absolute, uncompromised victory was sweeter than I could have ever imagined. True family is defined by consistent love and the conscious choice to show up, rather than biological ties. When those who should protect us fail completely, it reflects their limitations instead of our true worth. Betrayal can unexpectedly serve as a powerful catalyst for massive personal growth. It pushes us to discover hidden inner strength and forge healthier connections moving forward. Healing truly begins when we finally prioritize our happiness and establish absolutely firm boundaries against toxic behavior. Please share your personal boundary journey in the comments section below and always subscribe for more empowering stories like this one today.